Look, I'm by no means an expert with technology. If a geek is 10, then I'm probably a 6, a 7 at best.
Well, your videos look pretty flashy, so I'd say you're probably an avid photographer.
Yeah, photography, video, predominantly artist and writer.
Oh, really? Okay.
But video, music, photography is kind of like a guilty pleasure. But pretty much anything visual, but storytelling's really the heart of anything I do, regardless of what medium I use.
Yeah.
Which was another reason I think that it was very easy for me to not even feel the resistance to marriage or children. Is I felt an immediate a fear that I'd need to give all that up just because of the time needed. If you're going to be a father, I knew what that would require and the time it would require. So I resisted it. I remember in my 20s when typically you get family or asking you, or your friends would start to slowly get married and so forth. And underneath it all, I remember kind of feeling a bit odd and a little bit tense, where I didn't realise how they were so confident. Ostensibly, when I looked at them, they were all fairly secure, and they'd kind of say, well, human, time to let that old life go and start this new one. And I'd be like, I don't know how to be anyone else. Like, I can't be a father. I can't be a husband. And so I just held it at bay and made excuses and said, oh, well, I'm saving up for a house later and I want to take my time. I want to find the right person. I don't want to jump into things. But secretly, I was just really, really skeptical. I wanted to be convinced objectively, whether it was by some woman falling out of the sky and convincing me, or warming up to the idea of that life. But it never eventuated. The opposite actually happened. I clarified that wasn't me, and I was a person that could only be who I always was. So for good or ill, I've just remained, I think I've remained the same kind of person, but I've just grown from that point. But I haven't really switched, and I've never understood people who change their lives like they go on holiday.
Yeah. So I mean yourself, because you're a fascinating guy. I mean, you've been I was listening to a bit of your chat with Paul Elam, which I thought was pretty insightful from both ends. And you were talking sort of about your history in the manosphere and how long you've been sort of involved, either in forums or sort of watching and making content. What was the sort of the big step for you that made you venture into making content? Because you've been making it probably, about 3 years now or so?
Yeah, I kind of was on the message boards back in the day before MGTOW was known. It's probably most well known on YouTube. Right. But back then I was chatting with some of the guys that actually came up with the logo. In Europe, I think it was Ragnar and somebody else, one or two other guys. They actually had face-to-face meetings. They'd do little catch-ups. Right. And but on the message boards, I remember back in that day, I think it was called the Man Coat Forum. Right. And then it changed to be called the Nice Guy Forum because of the guy who was running it. And then it got changed to MGTOW Forums officially. And actually, I've had dinner with a nice guy who ran those early forums. He's a really cool guy, and all of them were actually. That's the funny thing when I look at what the manosphere now is. The high mind, the maturity, the mental calibration to sort of reason and evidence, and the real stoicism, the intelligence is kind of really gone. The cupboard is bare. And that's why, personally, myself, I haven't identified as MGTOW for a couple of years now, only because of the quality control. Not because I don't consider myself a man going his own way and doing his own thing, but because it's very easy to dismiss anything I say if I wear the MGTOW T-shirt, because no one's listening to me. I mean, to me, MGTOW's a verb. It's not a title. It's not a group. It's not, and people, you listen to the way they talk, they still consider it a thing to be in, a group to be in. It is, as a result, a very loose community, but still people look at it as a community or group, like that's what it is first and foremost. But to me, it's always been a very individual thing, and then from there, it's myself as human standing shoulder to shoulder with other individual men. I'm not standing behind or in front of anyone, and I'm not sort of in a clubhouse, and I'm not a card carrying MGTOW. That kind of individuality has been lost, and I think it's a shame. But yeah, without getting too sidetracked, I chatted with those guys. Solaris as well was another big one. I even chat to him a couple of times a year via phone. So we still keep in contact.
How are they going? How do they sort of progress in life? How's their sort of perspectives, I guess, evolved over time?
They kind of, unsurprisingly went their own way when they either in some way said what they wanted to say, or they started to see that when they were online, maybe you had similar experiences. You weren't talking with peers anymore. You were constantly like, you realize the gap between you and others, and they might have questioned themselves whether they were helping. It didn't seem as familiar as it once did.
Right.
And I can understand that. I suppose with me these days, what's kind of helped me not even feel any of that is that I'm just talking to another guy when I make my videos. I'm talking to a younger version of me. I'm not trying to help quote-unquote men as a collective, because as you've mentioned, that men are a vastly different animal, especially the younger guys who are going through all of this. Whereas with us other older guys, we're kind of a little bit more settled. It's not as much of a problem as it was to us years ago, but we still think it matters simply because it has to do with the male human being, and that's one of which we are. We've got experience to offer. It's kind of like, although I've never wanted kids, perhaps that instinct to mentor as an elder comes through.
Yeah, definitely. That's a natural evolution of it as well. It's like you can ask her, what is wisdom? Wisdom, it's knowledge, but it's also experience. And if you're walking down the street and you see some chippy or builder who's working on a house, and see the house is all lopsided and the roof is leaking and there's holes in the windows and there's holes in the cedar. Now, you may not know anything about construction, but, you've read a few carpentry books and you've watched a few DIY videos on YouTube. You could rock up to him and say, hey, mate, so you've done a really shoddy job. You know that? You're aware of that? And he could turn around and say, well, that's fine. You build it then. Go on. And, honestly, you wouldn't know where to start. I don't know your background, maybe you've got some construction, but the point is you need the experience to be able to lay that foundation and go from there. So, that's applicable, and that's what I try to get across to guys as well that I work with. There's a degree of experience that older men have that we can pass on. We've lived it, we've experienced it. But what I'd say for a lot of the guys today, you've been around the block, you've got insights, you're an intelligent guy. I've lived myself, I've got some insights, but I think realistically we can't know what it's like for these guys, and I think that needs to be said. I don't want to make light of what they're going through. What they're going through it's pretty systematic, and I mean it's geared that way. They're experiencing a profound sense of social isolation. And people today, they're more isolated than ever. I mean, you look at we've got all the statistics to back it up and all the rest of it. But I mean, in my everyday life, and this isn't guys that have gone online, they don't know anything about what's going on online, the white collar, blue collar, all the rest of it. I've got a bit of a therapy background, so they approach me and they talk to me about their experience. And, it's just like people that you would deal with in therapy, whether it's in the prison environment or not. The majority of them are coming to you and they have just a severe lack of interpersonal relationships. And any that they do are toxic. And, as a result of that, they feel rejected, they feel alienated, they feel inadequate, they feel completely lost. And it's for a lot of men. Yeah, and I did my best. I can line them up with male mentors and get them involved in boxing and in different community sort of outreach things. But, man, when you really step back and look at it, the way that we've evolved or devolved over the past 100 years it's been astonishing. We were made to grow up in little enclaves where we'd know everybody, we'd work together, we'd go off and marry and we'd have this and that. And now it's just about, going out there and from location to location, you're trying to build interpersonal relationships and you're putting your career and your focus on money and ambition, the social status, all the rest of that above personal relationships. And we've evolved to have deeply interpersonal, independent relationships. That's just gone by the wayside. As a result, a lot of these guys just feel completely lost. It's really heartbreaking to watch.
Yeah, and a lot of things have dominoed and stacked onto them to sort of add to it. A lot of people try and say, well, what's the reason this has happened? But it's a whole concatenation of events. Single motherhood without fathers. Even if you do approach men aren't allowed to say things that they used to say. They can't actually speak to you in a masculine tone. Masculinity itself is atrophying because it's not allowed to express itself through language or action without the approval of the female mindset that's out there that's sort of pulling the strings. Men have an innate instinct to want to help and feel good about helping others and women and everybody. Yes. A man doesn't, because of all this kind of macho posturing online, the priapic kind of, put on a lion suit and act tough, and this is the way I can pantomime being a man. Guys, when they try today, this is, I think, part of them being lost, is they try it and they just know it's full of shit. They just know it's an act. They know they're putting on a lion suit and they're going out there and they're cross-dressing, and there's something in them that just wants to be real. They want to actually be tough. They don't want to act tough. And there's a lot of, there's information there that's pulling them in every direction, and they're so hungry and they'll try everything. They'll try whether it's PUA or they'll try this person or they'll, they keep trying things like suits, and nothing's fitting because the basic stuff that used to fit, it's not around, and it's not allowed to be around. I sympathise with them. Just last night I was having a conversation on my channel, and I realised it was really good. The young guys were helping each other. Right. But the thing is, I noticed some of the guys, they were well-meaning. It was all over the shop, man. It was one guy's voice was very how can I put it? You could tell he was read a lot of literature, a lot of mythopoetic literature that's helped him. But the guy he was talking to was just a pedestrian, everyday guy who's been brought up in a very traditional third world country family, and he just wants very practical advice, like. How do I get up in the morning, or my father is ashamed of me because I don't want to get married, yet I'm scared shitless. And one man's come up with a language that's propping him up barely, and he's saying, well, you need to find the good in this, and the sun doesn't need the earth needs the sun. It's kind of like, oh man, geez, can you stop being so theatrical? This guy wants very practical information, and these guys are scrambling to find anything that's nutritious and that can help them put their head above water. And I really think it's just the guys, the lack of elders online or out in the world. I think that kind of contributes to them kind of scrambling and trying to find anything that can kind of help them a little bit.
Yeah. Because you read Charles Bukowski, don't you?
Oh, yeah. He was one of the first guys that floored me. He's great. I can still pick up any one of his books and read a poem, and it still resonates.
So I remember he had that poem about the bluebird, and there was a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. So I say, just stay in there. I'm not going to let anybody see you. You just stay in there. But like when I used to work with the mates, what I found is there's something quite similar. I can touch on sort of 2 points and sort of reflect them back that I'm sort of seeing with the guys online. When we work with inmates, when we do a clinical intake, we take these guys into a rehabilitation module. So you have all these different modules. But when we brought these guys in, we do a basic video record and do what's called a historical review. So we'd want to understand what the story is, where they come from, what the environment was, what did they do, why did they do it, try to understand their perspective, and get an understanding of how their mind thinks and their rationalizations and all the rest of it. And of course we'd have to take into account if there's any risk and that sort of thing with addiction, self-harm. We have to draft a self-harm contract, that sort of thing. But we get them in there, and the reason that we've recorded is we'll play it back to them at the end of the module to sort of see where the progression has gone. But we'd bring these guys into role-play exercises, and, they play victim-perpetrator and then swap roles. So we'd want to get these guys into a frame of mind where they could understand from the victim's perspective, so they can develop empathy and they can sort of work through their maladaptive sort of mindset and the way that the mind works and the way that they think about things. But we'd video record that, and these guys, they were great at it. They all should be, Oscar-winning actors because they're inmates. So they come from the sort of brutal background, sort of survival instinct and all the rest of it. But we get into that, and once we started playing back those videos to these guys, what we came to find was it wasn't so much these guys having a negative self-image, but it was more like these guys had no self-image at all. It was just blank. All there was where they came from, the environment that they went into, the gang that they were with. So it's something I'm seeing quite similar with these guys. Some of the comments I've read and all the rest of it, these young guys online saying it would feel strange if I said me or I when I was asking for something.
Yeah.
About a goal. There was something that Stardusk said about a goal that he had moving towards, and they were saying that would be really foreign to me to even come to the point of visualizing a goal. For them, it's how do I get to that point? And, I've seen a lot of guys, like you see a lot of philosophers and motivational speakers, you get the Jordan Petersons who says, go clean your room, then go save the world. Well, okay, but what's missing is these guys have to have a very, very strong why, and that needs to have a really strong emotional connection to them. Why am I even visualize a goal in the first instance? And that's something that's really lacking for them right now. Even getting that stage, because they're not aware of what they're missing out on.
Yeah, I agree 100%, man. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I went from just scripted videos to showing my face was that personal aspect. I recognized that it was the thing that I resonated with whether I read a book, like you mentioned, Charles Bukowski, he's very good at personalizing things to elucidate what it is to be a human being and a man as a result. But I recognized online the problem, say, with men, the disenfranchisement, the feeling lost, the feeling invisible, not seeing yourself. And I think you touched on it with Stardusk's chat, is that we're so depersonalized that if we're talking behind avatars and it's just voices going through each other's heads, then I think it might actually add to the confusion. And I kind of knew that the things that I resonated with, I'd be watching other people's YouTube videos, actual physical people showing their face, and they might just be videoing themselves on holiday and then sitting with the camera and then just riffing for about 10 or 15 minutes about how they felt, about where they were. And it had nothing to do with manosphere content. And I go, yeah, that's it. That's exactly how you connect with a human being, not scripting poetic literature and scientific literature that can often come off as cold, but this stuff is personal. It's all well and good, and I've made a few videos that I say, like, information won't save you. Like, it's good to process that stuff, but you need to integrate it as a flesh and blood human being, or as Quasimandias, my friend online, said. He said, you really need to calibrate a first-person perspective of your life. Like your reality really needs to start working from a first person perspective, like you and outward. It's not, I'll find the answers by trying to grasp on something external to me. Here's Briefold's law, or here's the divorce statistics, or this is how this ex treated me. Like they're all these external things, but in a sense, you're always missing the point of not seeing yourself. I'm amazed to the degree to which guys don't see themselves, and they're actually hollow and invisible. And as you said, you listen to their language. There's no I. There's no processing of language through the I. It's all them, men, women, society, communism, leftism. It's all these constructs, and it's almost like this helpless, passive victim trying to breathe and trying to understand the external. Whereas I find it really odd. I don't know, like when I was confused, I didn't know one way or another, but what helped me come out of it was when I started to realize I was at the center, and I started to kind of see that I'm not really, I get the sense that most guys feel like they're like an object that's placed into this world, and then it's like, go survive this, whereas I kind of actually feel like I generate my world. Like I create everything around me, whereas most guys feel like the world already exists. And look, I know it does. I'm just talking as a mental exercise. I always felt more that I'm not just placed in an environment. Fair enough, things may not work for me, or I don't understand them, or I fight against them. But I've got a very big self-centeredness about me in a healthy way. So, and we touched on like my reasons for not marrying and stuff. Like I could never understand how you could actually do something that wasn't you. If it's not me, it doesn't interest me. If it doesn't integrate through me, that I can understand and relate to the world with, then like I have to exist. And I noticed that the language is completely different from between me and much other men that are fighting against the things that you and I probably fought against. But their language always, you think you get them to understand. They take one or two steps into self-assessment, like trying to understand the I, and then all of a sudden the next sentence is, yeah, but women, yeah, but marriage, yeah, but the laws. It's kind of like, no, come back. Like it's like if you conquer this, then that stuff is there's hardly any fear. Like you know how to deal with it. But they're not kind of they've got no center. They've got no sense of who they are as a person to be able to try and tackle any of these things. They're really, really helpless.
And it's like they say, learned helplessness is taught. We all grow up wanting to conquer the world when we're kids. But I mean, most people today, you look at the everyday adult, they just condition themselves to act on impulse. Most people's lives are just a response to external conditions. It's, life is going to reflect your fears more than your goals or your dreams. So most people, what they do, the human condition, they avoid their fears. They're like trapped in an invisible cage. It's like this electric cage that they walk around in, so they get a shock every time they go near to step outside of their comfort zone. So that's all self-imposed. Is that the matrix? Maybe it is.
And it's also like they're fighting the false information too. You notice today the sophistry in the language, it's presented to them as though it's helping them. So the big thing recently is always, as a couple of generations, the spiritual aspect of live in the now translates to most guys as in, oh, well, I don't have to be responsible for my future tomorrow, and I'll try my hardest to forget my regrets, but they're painful. But I won't deal with them. I'll just stay here, and I'll just live short term. Like living in the now, like it's not taught to guys that that's the only place you can actually act. And the place you can actually act is very important for men, because largely we are human doings. So the now is very important for that part of men's experience. But everything else, men can calibrate the action of now by looking at the wide game of past and future and understanding how they can move in the present. but they're kind of taught to think like females, like, no, the past and the future, that's kind of, you suppress that, and the future is very Cinderella-like. You know, it's going to be fantastic. You know, the world, the universe will give you everything you want. And the present is just act like a child as though tomorrow doesn't exist, and that's happiness. And it doesn't fundamentally, I think, subconsciously sit well with a guy who starts to become a little bit intellectually curious, because he understands tomorrow the sun will rise. He understands that he has to be responsible. If, for instance, he wants to have a family, he understands in his gut, regardless of women and what everyone says, that he needs to build something. If he wants to support a family, if he wants to have a child, if he wants to pick as good a woman as he can amongst all the dreck out there today, he's going to have to approach things forward thinking and responsibly. But the language is all very, very female, very, very lack of responsibility. And men are trying on that suit, but it doesn't fit them.
Yeah, I agree. There was an old Irish boxing coach. He told me years ago. He said, your toughest opponent is your mindset. He said to me that he said, look, this is it. I mean, if you don't get what you want, you'll suffer. If you get what you don't want, you'll suffer. If you get what you do want, you'll suffer, because you won't be able to hold on to it. You know, and that's the human mind. The human mind is the problem. That's the obstacle. You know, it wants to dig its heels in. You know, it wants to be free of change, free of obligations, free of pain. That's a natural human condition. So, you know, I can understand a lot of these guys. I've seen it to an extent, but I haven't dealt specifically with guys like this. I've dealt with guys like from, you know, sort of rough backgrounds and that sort of thing, so it's a bit different. But yeah, you see these guys are just they're just imprisoning themselves in solitude because they've been alone for so long. You know, they think that people won't understand them or just completely reject them. You know, they'll just think that they're unable to build and maintain close relationships, that, you know, things that make them actually happy. They'll say to me, you know, nobody understands me. Well, look at the thousands of other men I've talked to that say the exact same thing. You're not alone. You know, this is something that's facing men today. And, I mean, you could go up to somebody on the street and you could ask them, what is community? What is that to you? And they'd probably struggle to find an answer. In today's society, there's been a big shift. Well, you talk about women, and I've said it before, women have walked away from traditional roles decades ago. You know, I said it was time for men to do the same. But, you know, have they walked away? Have they been edged out? I don't know. But it's time for men to redefine what community is. They can change their perception. They can change that and redefine that for what they want. It's what they want it to be. You know, it could be boxing. It could be a different sport. It could be about men, you know, doing the Aussie shed and building things. You know, teach me, mentor me. I mean, it should be about people, not stuff, not things. It should be about community and tribe, not work or a career. It should be about people, not places. You know, traveling all over the world alone. I mean, you can see that, but the experience is within. I mean, and every decision you make is a cost. You know, it has a cost. It takes investment of resources and time and all the rest of it. But we're taught to just focus on all these other peripheral things. But how much investment and time do people invest into building interpersonal relationships? Right, they're at the bottom rung.
Oh, sure. So it's another reason I say it's the world script and the marketing and the commercials and what's considered a freeing and actualized life out there is very, very female. It's either running away from or running towards something, but it's never standing still. And I think a man's sense of stability is grounded in sitting still. That gives him security. Like you said, building interpersonal relationships, not, you know, the means today of is just go out there on endless holidays and experience and experience and experience. Yeah. And to me, it's a waste. You know, I remember quite vividly, like I went to Nepal about a year ago, and I really enjoyed it, but I was hit with a profound sense of this is great, but I'm no different here than I am back at home in Melbourne. I appreciated it, but I had no bug to want to just globetrot around the world. Like anything that was revealed there, should be revealed in your own home or around your friends. Like if your world is so dead around your friends and your normal routines and you like your life, it says a lot that you need to go to a part of the world where you know nobody, don't know the language. You effectively gone to Mars and you've found yourself out there. Like how the fuck can you find anything that's you in such a foreign destination? I think sometimes the only reason people do perhaps get some sort of revelation is they mentally let go and forget about their lives. They're in a state of the present moment when they are overseas. And I made that, I actually did a video about that, where I realized when I was overseas, it felt so good because I was responsible for nothing. I was just living where I was, and tomorrow didn't matter. Yes, I knew I had to catch my plane in a week, but right now, time paused, time didn't exist, and I could do anything I wanted. I had no itinerary. I could get up and go to bed, sleep, eat, do whatever I wanted, explore whatever, basically just complete freedom. And that's why people feel so good, because they don't try and recreate any kind of freedom or autonomy where they live in their lives.
Yeah. I think when I've worked with like repeat offenders and boys in the Borstal and all the rest of it, we get these guys in, and it's about meeting them halfway. So I want to understand where they're at. Are they ready for change? Where they come from, what's their story, all the rest of it. But getting them in there and working with other men. And it's a shame because what we have there, in community outreach groups and those sorts of things, is just, it's so rare. You would not get that with the average man. We can do that with offenders. We can do that with, recently released inmates and all the rest of it. We've got the funding for it, but we can't do that for the average Joe. And I've seen the benefits from it. These guys going into apprenticeships, and their entire social circle becomes male. All these different groups that they're a part of, and then they can impart, everything that they've learned and mentor and go from there. And there's guys in their 20s that are doing this. They turn their entire life around. And that's what male mentorship can bring. It's, when you look at social relationships, what are they? Well, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality.
Yeah.
But it should be adding meaningful value to life. I mean, it gives them a sense of identity, a sense of belonging. It provides support. It enables them to cope with stresses in everyday life. It provides information and support that they won't get anywhere else. It's to watch. It's amazing.
Yeah, the practical aspect is a big thing, guys. Don't realize can be so helpful, because it comes down to, if you're not an intellectually curious person, say like you or I, the average male at their base is a practical animal. We get a lot of value out of life and a lot of fulfillment through a tactile sense of life. And so the mentorship of just working on a car with a friend or building something, furniture, that sort of stuff, and the camaraderie that ensues from that. There's so little of that, and men are just left in a mental space. Now, you and I, it might be easier for us because we've got a natural inclination to be curious. We want to know. But most guys, they're not interested in philosophy. They want a practical, ethical example of how I can stop feeling so bad, how I can stop feeling like there's speaking of Bukowski, that beautiful quote where once he said, like, he's lying on his...
Not about the blonde with the big tits, is it?
No. It's the one where he said he was lying on his bed looking at the ceiling, and he was thinking about the knife in the kitchen drawer and holding the edges of the mattress tight with his hands. And it was such a vivid description of just the angst and the stuff a man goes through. And these guys, all it might take is, oh, hey, I didn't know I liked building chairs. And all of a sudden he's got something to wake up for. He's starting to plan the next piece of furniture in his head. He's starting to sort of move forward. And people think it's kind of laughable. Well, it's just a hobby. It's like, it's not. We need to actually touch and do something. We need to enact with life. Women can be passive. We can't. And I think men today, if they've been scarred and hurt, they think, well, I'll do the opposite of what hurt me. I will not engage with with anything, and I'll be safe. Well, you'll be safe, but you're going to go insane. It's going to be worse in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Those are some really good points. I mean, you look at like what the major benefit of social networks and what I always try to promote. Maybe I've never been specific enough about it, how guys go out there and sort of create social networks. But the major benefit of it is empowerment. If you look at the World Health Organization, like they went right into it and they broke it down into 3 levels. You had there was material empowerment, psychosocial, and political, and it's just about empowering the individual and all the rest of it. But yeah, when you talk about curiosity, that's what I try to impart as well. You know, it's if you look at AA, like what they talk about, a lot of guys that I know have gone through it, and they say that if you're really serious about getting out there and creating social networks, you have to like at least try 6 groups in a row. And you're probably going to fail 5 or 6 times, but you just got to keep persisting. And these people on the bottom rung. So, you know, they've come to that point, so they've got no other option. So they invest that amount of time into doing it, and it's like a part-time job. But what they advocate is every time you turn up, you've got to be curious. You know, curious about others, and that takes your focus away from all the painful feelings, you know, that tend to make you hide away all those presumptions that you have, all those self-deflating thoughts, all the rest of it. You know, if it's a dead end, you move on, you try another. But
but again, it's the hardest for the guys who aren't curious, intellectually or otherwise, and I think that's where it's the hardest. They just want an answer. They want a one-size-fits-all. Just hand it to me. Give me a pill that will make me feel better. I don't want to think like, that's touchy-feely. That's literature. I'm not a smart guy. Just give me something to quell the pain. But something interesting you said in terms of being curious is I always remember a quote that said, you cannot be angry and curious at the same time. It's impossible. And without the curiosity, like you and I might have it naturally, it may be a little bit easier for us to sort of quell moments where we've been sort of hurt or traumatized because we want to fix it. We're curious about ameliorating whatever's happened to us and understanding it and, mitigating all of that. But whereas guys like, it burns, help it stop hurting. You know, I just give me a pill.
Yeah. Well, really, you've got to really work at it. I mean, I did. And it's through experience that you find out what you want, and you fall into things. That's how I fell into therapy and all the rest. I said, okay, right, I want to be, I want to move into that field. Okay, well, here you go. And the guy brought me along, and I went to a group, and it was a bunch of sex offenders. And said, okay, we're going to do role play. And I had to get down on my knees and I'd play victim. Then I had to stand up and play perpetrator. And that was my initiation. I was like, okay, well, that's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. But, it gave me in a room with a bunch of, trained psychiatrists and psychologists, and I got to really pick their brain, and I said, this is pretty fascinating work. So it opened up avenues for me down that way. And likewise with boxing, I mean, it's opened up so many avenues for me because you work with so many different community groups. And as a result, you get to network with other people. You find out what makes them tick. Okay, well, I can use my expertise over here. You find out where you're valued, and you can add value in every aspect. And that's how I've always approached it, because, when I was a teenager, I was off the rails and all the rest of it, but somebody took time to take me under the wing and actually see promise in me when it came to boxing, and they validated me. And getting around my peers, so we all started reinforcing each other. Saying, no, you can't do that. You're letting us down. And then boundaries were set, which was just incredibly, it was comforting for me. If you come from a background like that, you lay boundaries, you know where you stand. You test the mettle of the person in charge, but he's your mentor, and you respect him. That's that process I've always tried to replicate during my life, but a lot of these guys, of course, they've never experienced it. They've never seen that.
Well, again, that comes back to in terms of mentorship and elder figures and experience coming into it, because all these lost guys, they're competing with each other when they're around the same age. But you tend to see guys don't compete with elders. They sit and listen because it's self-evident that this person's bigger, wiser. He's more eloquent. He's experienced. He feels like he can read your mind because he's talking about things that have happened to you or are. And so I think that there just needs to be more of that. Otherwise, we're just going to continue getting an increase of guys that are around the same age, fighting each other in a Lord of the Flies environment, trying to compete with each other and posture and play superhero. They're not being themselves in a real sense. They're always putting on a hero outfit and trying to be the man or trying to win. But when they go to sleep at night, I think they're anxious. I don't think they believe a lot of the bullshit that they sort of prance around with. And it's the elder stuff, the experience. I mean, even if you don't want to say older, experience just comes with someone who knows more than you, and you sit still. You learn patience. You learn information. You learn things you didn't know before. I've always believed one of the things, like I've spoken about it quite a bit in terms of the silencing of masculinity and what it is to be a man. And now it's almost seen as clownish. Like if you say the word masculinity out loud, it's almost like you're talking about some sort of conspiracy theory, and people will roll their eyes. But I think this silencing of terms that are essential for guys and that have become more and more vague today, and they're the one thing that can actually help guys, is part of the problem. The language is actually closing the doors on avenues that can actually help guys, the way they speak, where they want to be curious towards. All of these doors are shutting, and all they're being left with is looking towards the environment and saying, what answers have you got for me? Like, what answers that you allow me to have do you have for me? And those answers aren't going to be male. They're not going to be masculine. Like, I think men need to be tested, and masculinity is like a muscle that needs to be exercised. It's a philosophical exercise. They need a resistance in order to know what it is to be themselves as men. And that's why sometimes I get the charge of, human, why do you still date women from time to time? Just don't worry about them, have nothing to do with them. And becoming more and more safe. And okay, I do still enjoy certain aspects of them, and it's died down a lot over the years. But I've had periods where I've locked myself in complete solitude and read and contemplated, and it was a good exercise, but the longer you do it, it poisons you. You need to actually go out there and practice your ideas. I mean, that's what Aristotle said. Ethics are nothing if you don't practice them. Ethics by their nature need to be practiced, or they're nothing at all. Like it's just a masturbatory exercise where you get up on stage and hold a skull out and, pretend to be in some Shakespearean play. And whenever they kind of say, well, it's too dangerous, I go, well, that's part of the reason you feel nihilistic and hopeless. You need to go there, just like the gym. You need to resist against something. T.S. Eliot said, if you aren't over your head, how do you know how tall you are? And I think you need to know yourself. And when you know yourself, that's where confidence comes from.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It comes from competence. It comes from curiosity, but it's also living truthfully, which, you do. I know Stardust does. I often think of what Stardust would do in this situation, when I'm out there trying to negotiate with people and all the rest of it. So would Stardust compromise? Would he go to an A, B, C, D plan? No, I don't think he would. But that's, I don't know if he would, but, it's everyday life. It's, that you've got to interact with your environment. You've got to face your fears and all the rest of it. And they call that, what do they call it in psychiatry? Systematic desensitization. So, you've got to get out there and face your fears, and that's when you're really living. But I think what I see with a lot of people, and especially with a lot of young men, which is concerning, everything in their life just becomes socially constructed. And again, it's just built around something that's, I suppose if you look at, your environment, you can make things real through your interaction with them. But as a result, your identities become somewhat socially constructed. Like, like your socioeconomic status or how physically attractive you are. If you're doing that, those things are social constructs. You're basically building an invisible walls around you, like an invisible prison. When you see them for what they are, you can be free from them. then you enter, greater possibilities and all the rest of it. But like that part of the black pill, I can see what they're doing. Like, they're talking openly and honestly. Okay, well, it looks, dude, look at the Tinder statistics, dude. Look, can't get around it. Okay, you've got one piece of the puzzle. Okay, that's something you can't change. Now, let's focus on what you can. Right, there's a whole world out there. So what are we going to do from this point? How are we going to apply that logic? How are you going to now construct your own reality, your own community, your own tribe? What's the next step?
Have you read Jack Donovan's work?
No, I haven't. No.
Oh man, you'd love his work. He's very tribal. All his writings are based on masculinity. I think you'd really like it, and he talks a lot about that in terms of the virtues of men, honor, things like that. So I highly recommend it. I think you'd resonate a lot with that. If I talk, I'm always trying to talk about the individual male, and I often reference women because it's the most potent example. It's men's biggest fear and thing to conquer. And it's always amazing that I'll talk about the person and myself, and I'll always relay the I. And women are just the easy example that you can understand the concept I'm working on or I'm talking about. And invariably you get so many men in the comment section saying, LOL, you just talk about women. And I say, you don't get it. I don't talk about women. I'm talking about me. I don't talk about women. And they said, but you mention women all the time. It's like, I don't know how to change your language, dude. Like, I'm giving you a reference point to understand yourself, and you just still think I'm talking about women. It's like a heroin addict, if you like, or alcoholic. If I talk about alcohol and what I'm doing and how it's affected my life, it's like I'm not obsessed with alcohol. I'm obsessed with getting better. I'm obsessed with me.
And I can see where you're coming from. It's coming up from a philosophical perspective, but also a practical perspective, because we live in the same world, 50% of the population. That's the way it works. But the thing with you is, you're not going in to teach somebody anything. You're only there to make them think. And you're going to put out examples, and you're going to talk about maybe your specific experience. I mean, when I used to do videos, it was the same thing. It wasn't necessarily always my experience, but I'd talk about my own experience and all the rest of it. So it's using that as a kickoff point. But what I find with a lot of the guys today, a lot of younger guys, if they haven't even experienced women, as a result of the way that society is structured now, and I'm taking that into account, a lot of guys can't get a look in because of social media and all the sexual options that women have. I understand that, and I'm not dismissing that. But I remember there was a writer, it was Yukio Mishima, and he talked about beauty all the time. And he said, essentially, when you're separated from something that you can no longer touch, that object it becomes sanctified. It acquires the beauty of the unattainable. And a lot of what we did with early MGTOW was, don't focus your life on women. Don't make that the centerpiece of your life. And a lot of guys, the older guys, it seems like they've taken that to heart, and they're doing very well. From what I've been seeing, they're happy and they're content and doing their thing. But a lot of these guys have never experienced women, but at the same time, they've built this enigma. Women have rejected me, thus I am nothing. And it feeds into all this other hysteria in their head and these false premises. It's just, you have more value.
They've elevated them much more than we did. Women were always something for men to understand, for the simple fact that we pursued them and we had to ask them and get on our knee and pay for dinner, and we'd always want them to say yes to us and accept us. But these days, because of this feminine mystique that they've elevated women to, like much more than our fathers and grandfathers and ancestors, it's become ridiculous. It's become so focused, like it's this goal to obtain. She's so much more of a goddess than I think any of our ancestors actually even saw women as. They realised in certain aspects of life where women had power, but there was much more of a grounding that, hey, we're both human beings, whether you're a male or female, but we recognise that there's certain aspects of men that are sort of more to, that are more, say, either godlike or Apollonian, and similar with women. Like they've got these things in them that we can't help but feel because of everything we want to do for them. They're ethereal in a lot of ways. But in a lot of these guys who are living very different lives today, all they see is the reward of this goddess that, please just accept me. It's almost like going to heaven. I want to go to heaven, and heaven's name is woman. And my life now here is nothing until I can one day I can transcend into heaven, and I hope that that I can one day get into heaven. It's just so ethereal that they're wasting their lives here. And the false marketing, when you think about it, not to be blunt or rude, but in so many ways that matter, there's so much, they're so below men that men's lack of self-confidence just really does them a disservice. They're not above you. Like they're human beings like you, but if it helps you, statistically, you're above women in every way that can be measured. Stop thinking so lowly of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was like in my talk at Stardusk, he made a statement, what's the new standard? If you want to qualify for a Tinder date, you've got to have a 50-foot yacht and a skyscraper.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not far off from the truth, but it's like yourself at your age now. I'm sure that, like Stardusk has been quite open about in the past, he had toxic relationships. We've all been there. But I mean, at your age, would you invite that back into your life? Would you willingly invite that at your age? Yes, that's what I mean. You can see it, and we can sit back and laugh and go, to the young guys, do you understand what you would be bringing into your life? How that would be so disruptive and toxic and harmful to you. And not only that, you wouldn't know how to navigate it. You wouldn't be able to set boundaries.
Some of the guys will actually say, well, it's easier for you, you're older. You don't have these hormones pulsing through your system. That's true. But imagine you didn't have someone older like me. You're fortunate enough to have me as an older version, perhaps of you. If you resonate with the way I talk and my personality, and there's something about me on my videos, or if you meet me in person that you really feel a connection with, how much worse would it be if there wasn't someone like me around? How much worse would your life be? How many more mistakes would you have made? Imagine you didn't have the light bulb of, oh my God, human could easily be me in 10 or 15 or 20 years. That stuff is invaluable. And that's what's missing. But in terms of going back to the online dating thing, women do not change. I'm in my mid-40s, and the women on their profiles still are saying the same things and acting the same way as they did when they were in their 20s. You've got single mums with 3 to 5 children who still want everything they did when they were 20 in their prime. And it's only with the benefit of red pill wisdom and being mentored. We had the benefit of being mentored by wise and intelligent elders, even if they were our peers. But these kids, they're teaching themselves, which is very dangerous. And what are you going to do? Continue to keep making the same mistakes like Groundhog Day until you're, in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and you don't learn anything because all you're doing is talking to your friends, and you have no wiser, older version of you warning you. It's like the ghost of Christmas future, actually visiting you at night and actually shocking you into recalibrating your life and saying, snap out of it, stop doing the same thing over and over again, and take a different direction into a better future. Before I forget, I still remember, I can't remember what video it was, but one of your videos really sunk into me. If I remember correctly, it was, if pain doesn't lead to awareness, you've wasted your suffering. And that always stuck in me. I thought that was brilliant. I can't remember which video it was, but that was something I really got from one of your videos, and I thought that was so poetically short and sweet. It set a volume.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's when you're facing your fears and your pain, that's when you're living. I always say that, and you get a lot of people, and all there is just emotional and psychological dysregulation, and they're letting all these suppressed emotions that they're not working through and not identifying control their whole life, and that, they're acting on impulse. So like all these people out there got borderline personality disorder. It's like someone's in the driver's seat and they're not in control. But, they'll allow that to happen.
You know what I also think, sorry to interrupt, but what I also think helps guys today so much more, the more I talk to them, is giving them very simple and concentrated answers, because you and I, because we grew up in an era where we liked literature, we searched out things, answers. The attention span of people today is very short, and so you have to hit them over the head with poetry and not a novel. So I hear a lot of guys trying to, if you're trying to help someone in this generation with an expansive explanation, you've lost them after the first sentence. You really need to sort of give them something like the thing I mentioned, if pain doesn't lead to awareness, you've wasted your suffering. That's short and sweet, that resonates, and that can flick the light bulb on. But a lot of guys, they're getting messages from everywhere that doesn't make sense, from women that just meander, and the meandering, confusing language really doesn't sort of click for men. It needs to be very short and sharp. They need to be very practical, like you mentioned before, get up and go for a run or walk, go to the gym. Yeah, but why? Just do it. Like, make it blunt, make it short, and you'll start to sort of see the results from there. If you're intellectually curious, you'll absorb paragraphs of information. But I think the vast majority now have been conditioned with social media to sort of, they want sound bites. It's the only thing that'll resonate. And whatever we can sort of teach them, they need to be short, sharp concepts. I mean, even when I do a video now, I don't make long, expansive videos because it gets lost. I pick one very sharp topic I want to focus on, and I talk it to death until I get the point through, and that's that video done. And I try not to make the video more than 10 minutes, but really have like very acute lessons, bite-sized lessons that I chat to somebody about like a human being, someone catching up with someone else at a bar. That sort of literature-based, theatrical, mythopoetic sort of big lessons, I don't think the young of today can sit through them. They get bored, they doze off.
Yeah, I suppose so. It's like, when I suppose when the young guys, they sort of build up these social constructs, and like you say, they get the sound bites and all the rest of it. But, I guess those invisible walls that they build around themselves, they build it around themselves to avoid reality and avoid pain. I mean, that's a natural default state, I get it. But the only way out of that prison is to confront reality. And you can only do that by exposing yourself directly to all your emotional issues, emotional problems, your fears. The only way to really, truly live out in the world is to live out in the world, not in your head. You've got to step outside.
Well, that's something that brings me to sort of a practical exercise that, again, for me, I discovered it because I was interested in writing and literature. And so I found that when I started to write down my thoughts and journal many years ago, slowly that started to explain things, because when the thoughts are just swimming around your head like a hive of words and ideas, you can't catch any of them. They're like a herd of cats. But when you can actually put them down on paper and then later on you read them as a third person, often you can actually read your thoughts and think, shit, do I actually think that of myself? Do I use those words? I didn't realize I used the word hate and I don't know and what, and like you start noticing the language that's going on and the way you express yourself. And those things are really enlightening, and they were to me. And then the more I started writing, the better you write, the better you think, and then the better you speak. And all of those things lead to confidence in the world, lead to standing up for your values when you're in front of a blue-haired feminist, or you're in front of a boss that's making you work overtime when you don't want to. It really makes you stand up for something when you can articulate it. And I encourage any men, if they have an inkling to be able to write, even as an exercise, that it can help you sort out your words and the hive of ideas that are swimming around in your head.
Yeah. It's one of the exercises I used to do with inmates. It was trying to break through resentments. Like you'd want to identify, who you've got the resentment with. And then you're going to identify what part you played in it. And it goes through a whole process of, writing which part of your life is affected by the resentment that you're harboring. How is it helping you? So you try to get to a point where you get a clear picture of who you resent, why you resent them, the negative ways it impacts your life, and the part you played in it. So you understand your resentments by breaking them down and, get out of that just full-on cycle of fear and anger and resentment and just transform into someone who can identify the source of their feelings and target specific areas that they want to work on. And that, like you say, it creates a language all in and of itself. It's about identifying those things.
And today, more than ever, we're imbued through language much more than we were before. You could survive on a farm in the past not knowing how to write or even think. You'd go through the rudimentary actions from sun up to sundown, and you'd be quite content for all of your life. But now everything, like the propaganda and the machine, is controlled through language. Everyone is controlled through it. So it's in your best interest to have some sort of interest in describing the language in your own head, how you see things, how you speak to yourself, how you put yourself down, how much or how little you think of yourself. It's quite revealing. I think Aristotle said the aim of writing, I think he was describing art in general, so I think it was the aim of art, is to represent not the outward appearance of things, but the inner significance of things. Like that's the whole purpose of creating art or writing or whatever it is. It's not to sort of express anything out there. It's sort of to focus on the significance of inside, whatever you're creating, like what's inside you, what you really believe and what you really feel. And especially through language, because today we live through language more than we ever have. And unfortunately, we're controlled through language a lot more than we ever have been.
What I see with a lot of them is, what I saw a lot with when I was had young inmates and offenders in therapy is, sometimes I put walls up, not to keep people out, but just to see if anybody cares enough to break them down. I get that. So you get like these memes come out like it's over. I'm 21 years old and I've never been with a woman, and there's no point in living, and the world hates me. And a lot of guys in our generation had the same issue. Yeah. Everything's changed. You relocate to another city. Now you're going to college. You're doing this. You're doing that. Of course you're going to be isolated. The only way that you've got to find another way of building up those networks. You've got to become active. Do you want to live reactive to how everybody perceives you and the environment you live in, or do you want to actually start building up momentum and creating good habits that are going to lead to better things? We call it sort of refilling the inner circle. You've got your contacts at the gym and the boxing gym and the college and the campus and the workplace and all the rest of it, but who's your real inner circle? Who are these people you spend time with? What kind of quality relationships do you have that you can talk to another mate and you can tell them what's going on for you? Well, the rest of them, most guys are devoid of that. And most guys our age are devoid of that. Guys are currently married, have gone through divorce or in the second marriage. We've seen it. As soon as that breaks up, they have nothing. They have no network. They have nobody to talk to. And that's why the suicide rate is double that of, the average man.
Well, that's always been the thing that scared me the most, and it didn't seem to scare a lot of guys. I always was very acutely aware of, if you take potentially my woman, or say I was going to get married or something, if you took that away from me, you took my job, there's a bit of fear creeping up in my psyche, and I didn't like it. Like, you mean that if I don't have these things, I don't know who I am or what I want to do, and I feel lost? I feel like, I don't know if there's a tomorrow. And that really scared the shit out of me. And I knew it was something that I really needed to keep thinking about, find some answers, ways of coping, because those external things, all of them can be taken away. You may even want to take them away yourself. That happened to me years ago, where I left a job because I wanted to take time off, but I knew that it could potentially ruin my relationship. Because the girl I was with at the time, she was your typical woman. She liked going out and so forth, but she wasn't that bad. Like, we got along, we had a lot of similar interests, but like most women will say money's not important, but when the rubber hits the road, when survival comes, like sort of
when the check comes.
Yeah. And I remember when I left work and I just said, look, I don't know what I'm going to do. I was middle-aged, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm just going to take maybe half a year off, maybe a year off, and just see what happens until I kind of find my way again. And I just saw the change in her. She did not like me anymore. She didn't, the lack of security in me was, you could actually see her. She had sort of disgust and contempt for me. But I knew I needed to be prepared to lose her and my job and everything, because none of it felt like it mattered. I've actually said it a few times. I felt at that point where I'd engineered my life to a point where I thought I had everything I wanted. Like there was nothing that I wanted, whether it was woman, job, the money I was making, my own home, etc., etc. But my world felt like it was in black and white, and I desperately wanted to feel the colour that I felt in a world when I was younger. I felt that had disappeared. And so the very first big thing I could sever in my life that I knew I cared little about was my job. All that was keeping me there was the money. And I had a bit of savings where I could take some time off and do nothing if I wanted. And I did exactly that because I knew that I needed to face that fear. Because rationally, you'll write down on paper, you go, okay, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? I leave my job. I know I've got money enough to survive for a year or so. Let me take 6 months off. Okay. I'm not being reckless, but I know I want to do this. I need to, switch that release valve and let some pressure off me because I'm suffocating the way I'm living. And so I did that. And then I kind of knew, well, there's a potential that the person I love is going to leave me. I hope she doesn't, but through everything I've learnt about female nature, it's probably going to happen. But I need to face that because, again, you're more truth and reality based at this point. And you say, well, if she does leave me, then I know she doesn't love me, and that's more valuable than pretending she does. Like I want the love to be real. And then what happened? A few months later, she left me. Because she mysteriously fell out of love after a couple of years. But conveniently, like you start to become more, you want to be grounded in truth no matter what. And even with your friends, like I don't just want acquaintances and people that want to be with me for superficial reasons or because it's routine or whatever. Like I want real friends. I want people that I can talk to. If I'm with a woman, I want to be able to talk to her, not be bored out of my skull. I don't care if she's a nice person. She could be nice, but I want someone that's for me. I want to be around a life that is made for me, and those things are hard, but they're things you need to face. One thing that helped me, I can't remember where I read it, but was paraphrasing now, but it's fear is easy to overcome. All you do is turn around and let it kill you, and then you've won.
That's great.
And that really kind of made me actually face everything I needed to face.
Yeah.
But again, that's a language that worked for me. That's what I'm saying. Like, people need to take the medicine that works for them. But there's so many voices out there that there needs to be more voices of experience. I think that would really help guys a lot more, rather than guys kind of posturing that, like, I'm right. No, I'm right. Like, it's just bullshit.
Yeah. And that touches on a lot of stuff. I mean, how many guys I know that have just pushed the reset button, which is really, it's quite heartwarming to see, and it's quite inspiring. Guys from all ages. But yeah, I mean, it's about sacrifice, ultimately. I mean, it's about living truthfully. You have to give up the things you're only pretending to have or live or act on or act within you're just doing it to please society and your peers and your family. And until you sort of jettison all of that baggage, you're not going to be able to trust yourself. Then people won't be able to trust you because you're not living truthfully. It's like I say, you assess your current goals. I mean, the goals that you have currently, are any of them in conflict with what you actually want? And most times they will be, for most guys. You know, they're trying to fit in. They're trying to fit together things that are going to keep, you know, the other half happy while they're trying to find their happiness. You know, most of these guys they're just inhibiting action. They're not acting. They're not acting proactively. You know, they're waiting. They're not initiating. But for goals, the goals need to be intrinsically meaningful to you. You know, you need to be able to, like you say, we talked about competence. You need to be able to have a plan. So you need to be able to trust your own knowledge and your abilities to achieve those goals. And those goals need to be achieved systematically and continually. You know, small goals. So that builds an ease in you. It builds a competence and a feeling of confidence. So that's facing your fears, but taking it step by step, incrementally.
Yeah. It's really a curious thing of you're trying to, because I know with myself when I talk to a guy that's really, you could see he's at a crossroads and you really want to help him, and I'm trying to sort of listen to him and understand his personality and his language, so I can try and modify my language to talk like the person he wants to hear, but offer him something. I don't want to talk like me, but I want to offer him anything I can in a language that he'll resonate with. And that's the thing, like they're at this crossroads and try and offer him something where they can actually take that motivational or a willful step towards something that they actually want. One thing I noticed today in the manosphere is most, if not all, of the videos and information is guys pointing to what they don't want anymore. It's very apathetic in their assessment of what the truth is. You know, women are like this isn't fair, men are treated like this, we no longer have this that our fathers had, like no to this, no to that, anti this, don't want that. And it's all either that they feel energized by what they know they don't want, and then it's either I'll just sit still or I'll lock myself in a sensory deprivation tank and just wait to die. But there's very few cataphatic guys or information, kind of giving information about the going part of going your own way. It's all it's all the resistant, and that's the big thing missing. The language of going, the language of ethics. What can I do? What gives me will and action? Like, where can I feel alive as a man and confident enough to articulate what I want? Like, at the very base, this is how impotent most guys have become, and how little and invisible they see themselves, is that you try and tell them, when they're telling you about their problems with their girlfriend or their mother or somebody, a female in their life, you offer to them, just say no to her, and they can't do it.
No.
They cannot say a very polite no, a no thank you, or I'll think about it, because the impulse from women asking or demanding is a nervous, I have to say yes. The eggs want me to say yes. But men just need to, if you can do that, which is why I always reference women, if men kind of can cut that umbilical cord, so much of their problems will just fix themselves in terms of their ability to stand up for their own values. Because right now you're only standing up for the values of the female in your life, or the system that's very female based anyway. But little simple things like that, I think, would really help guys today. The little sound bites of say no to her, the little sound bites of this is how you overcome fear, the little sound bites of if X happens, try Y. But the large Tolstoyan stories of, like, you know, an adventure, it's nice, and you have to actually dig for the lessons and interpret them. That language is being lost, and I think that language now needs to be built up with guys. Yeah. And then later on, hopefully, once they get that, then you can actually add on the Dostoevsky. Then you can add on the Nietzsche and Marcus Aurelius and all that. But you need the groundwork of ripping the Band-Aids off, of splashing cold water on a man's face. You need those short, sharp lessons to sort of sever cords, you know?
Yeah. I came back to sort of the manosphere online, and I saw a lot of despondency and hopelessness. A lot of guys saying just opt out, just give up.
Yeah.
Other guys saying it's over. I didn't expect it to go that way, and maybe naively, but and I've been away for a few years. My approach, and I thought the approach of a lot of other guys, was just put your nose to the grindstone, identify what you want, and move towards that goal. And I say that very flippantly because I understand, like I said, with these guys, maybe it's very hard for them to visualize a goal or find worth in a potential goal. So, I understand that. But, Stardusk, before we had our talk, he told me that there was a goal that he's working towards. He said he's got the time frame. This is what he's going to do. This is why he's doing it, and this is going to be the outcome. And for him, it's just like that. I think for most guys of our generation, it would be, where we just identified this is necessary now, we're going to move towards it. But yeah, it's the sense of hopelessness that came in, and maybe you're bang on about there being a more practical approach to that. It begins with psychology, of course. I mean, a life of ease is not the goal, and I definitely agree with that.
Well, like you've hinted on, if someone's completely unfit and they've never been to the gym in their life, you're going to get them in there, and you just got to give them the basics of eat a healthy diet, and here are the 3 compound exercises you do. You come in 3 days a week and you just do that. You don't hit them straight away with the forensics of, okay, you're going to start off with 12 bicep exercises on the first day, and you're not going to get advanced. And so the advanced appreciation of the forensics and the details, like the higher mind stuff, that's kind of gone. And so we kind of need to build up the atrophy of men's mental mind, that they're starving. They're starving for nutrition, which is all I see red pill stuff as being. It's male health. But build them up, get them to know the basics by short, sharp things that'll calibrate them into action, and then slowly you can start introducing the complexities, and then, because the complexities can only build on very basic foundations. So I don't think like the complex language, that doesn't really resonate. I think to guys, most guys out there, it's interesting, and it's kind of intellectual, but they don't it doesn't go through them. It doesn't resonate. It's not a religious moment like it might have been to you and I. Like, you and I could have read classical literature and been hit by religion when we'd read it, like a paragraph or a sentence, whereas to them, it's interesting and very intelligent, and they already don't feel good enough, so they think like, well, this is interesting, doesn't connect with me because it's too educated for me. But so we have to try and start to convey some of those ideas very short and very poetically, in the same way that, again, I want to reference Bukowski's a great introduction for people to resonate with meaning, because it's poetry. It's like a paragraph of meaning into one short line. I think that's what's needed with men today, is the short line of poetry, that we can start fostering a lot of the red pill ideas and getting them to act in their lives with this poetry, and not try and offer them a Tolstoyan novel.
Yeah, that's right. Bukowski, he was talking about, he said he's experiencing loneliness. He said, I think it's going to really give him any kind of sense of solace is going out there and being in the world. But he said, even if a blonde with big tits came in here, gave me a head job and rubbed my balls, would that make me feel better? Would I be all good? He said, no. He said, it'd just be a meaningless orgasm. And I mean, for a lot of guys, sort of our age, that's what it's kind of come to. We've got our goals and our things that we do, but, sort of relations with women, I've stated before, they were emaciated 10 years ago. Now it's just come to the point where they add zero value to my life. And that's, there was a point years ago where I was still sort of trying to bargain my way out of that, or find a way to work within that framework, and it just didn't go anywhere. And I'd be sitting across the table from a woman and she'd have that sadness in her eyes, because she knows inherently there's no value here. There's no, this isn't going to go anywhere. And it's
that's interesting. Yeah. I've experienced that look a few times in my later years.
And you feel sorry and you feel sad, and it's a mutual sadness. But it's, we've all got busy lives and all the rest. I'm sorry that you've been sold a lie, sweetheart, but it's, I'm not trying to be curt here, but it's, yeah, you made the mistake. It's your life. You have to live in it. Most women I know don't have any hobbies. Their partner is their hobby, or, their work is their hobby.
Yeah, well, I need someone I can talk to. I need a mind. And have you ever experienced this when you're dating in your later years? Is you could tell she's interested in you, and you're just kind of lukewarm because there's nothing coming back. Like you no longer respond to the things you used to respond to when, you no longer respond to the superficial things that you once did. Like you actually need a friend. You need to be a friend before this goes anywhere. I need to see a personality that I click with. And I had it a few times where after the date, they'd message, and after a few dates, I'm still trying to pry out some sort of personality to see if I want to continue this. And I'll get the SMS saying, well, I like you, but I just don't know where you stand or whether you like me or not. And I straight away think, and I message him, I'm saying, well, what do you think? What do you like me? Do you actually have a thought? Or do you know what you want? Do you have any concept of what you like? Or are you just some passive thing wanting to be liked? And it's no wonder I don't see anything there, because there's no personality there. They're still operating the same way that they did when they were a teenager. And maybe that's the benefit that guys get now. It's like they've heard the stories online. They go out there and they keep experiencing their dehumanization as men. And again, the juice isn't worth a squeeze and all that. Men can ascertain fair value. You expect me to act this way, yet I get zero in return. And in fact, these days I get less than zero. I actually get contempt, and I've done nothing wrong. Or as you mentioned, these days I'm in my mid-40s and I've got no debts. I've got a car. own my own place. I work. My life is great. And now it's a matter of what's a woman going to take away? How am I going to take backward steps? Yet when you go out with them, as you mentioned with Stardusk, it's on their profiles, they've got 3 children. They're these single mothers. And my humble home and humble car and no debts is still very ordinary. Do I have anything else to offer? Do I have 2 cars? Where is my house? It's for fuck's sake, I'm done.
It's gone insane. I haven't done no online dating. I've always met sort of women through sort of social networks, whether it's community groups and stuff like that, and somebody will introduce somebody and that sort of thing. But it's still the same. I'm experiencing exactly that, and it's come to the point where I haven't been in a relationship in years. I've dated and the casual thing and that sort of thing, but it's very, very difficult to find anything of meaningful value, and if it's not of value, I don't want it in my life. But
I remember I watched. Did you ever watch Paul Produce's videos?
Yes, he was great.
Yeah, I remember when I started watching this, I was still, as you said, in the last stages of my bargaining phase. I was out there dating with a slight tinge of rose-coloured glasses, and I found dating easy. I was dating different women, but I wasn't actually picking very many women that were really for me. They had a little bit of something I wanted, and I thought, that's good enough. I don't want commitment anyway. And I remember listening to a couple of his videos where he was always referencing being on dating sites, and he said, I'm always on there, but I haven't been on a date in 3 years. And I thought that was really strange, because I thought, you're a decent-looking guy, you're intelligent. And it's only now, a few years later, where you describe, the blank stare coming across the table. And it's I can understand now why he didn't date that often, because there's very little out there when you're being honest with yourself about the way you're living and what you want. It's very, very hard. The desert's dry out there.
And I could say to the younger guys, because, it's what they're saying is that they can't get a look in. And I understand that I've seen the stats. I'm not going to try and refute that. I absolutely understand, the position they're in. But at the same time, I get that you're missing out on experiences, and I'm not going to try and minimize that. But, take it from us. I mean, our experience.
Yeah, they're not going to take it from us. Let's be frank. Like, you and I never took it from our elders, and all I would say is to these guys, go out there and have recoverable risks. Recoverable being the operative word. Mitigate as much as you can. Learn as much as you can about reality, red pill stuff, the relationship between men and women. Learn to develop your ethics and morals and boundaries, and do not let anyone cross them, family or woman, and stand up for them. And developing that really strong foundation, then go out and extend yourself by a couple of small steps. Go out on a date and set sort of limits in terms of if I don't see A, B, or C, very reasonable A, Bs, and Cs, then I'm going to be honest with myself and not go any further and say no thank you. I'm not just going to let her lead the relationship. Most guys, they kind of go out on a date and she's nice and she likes him, and all that matters is that she likes him. He's led. She just takes the reins and you're in a relationship and you haven't even decided whether you want to or not. Like those sort of foundations, go out there and test yourself, as we mentioned before. Men need to be tested. Men need a tactile world by which they can calibrate and know themselves. So rather than being fearful, and if you want to sort of go back in life and live as a monk, but honestly, when you go to sleep at night, you're completely tranquil. You love that life. But I highly fucking doubt that most guys do. I think it's a stoic posture that is not really honest when they're alone in four walls. But for the majority of guys, where you've got a desire or an itch that you want to scratch it as sensibly as you can, with as many boundaries that you won't let be crossed. And when you get enough of those little experiences, cross your fingers, no woman takes advantage of you. You don't run into a psychopath, which I can just imagine guys listening to this saying, well, human, all it takes is one chick to sperm jack you and your whole life's over, and then they'll be blaming me in the comments section that some girlfriend, that chick they slept with just got pregnant. I'm not saying that. I'm saying don't deaden your life and just wait for the grave. Like, it's not, it's take recoverable risks and learn to have this first person centered relationship where you generate everything from you, not you're this passive person being pulled around by women and jobs, and you just say yes to everything. Like, you need to say yes to the world. The world doesn't have to accept you. Yeah.
I'd say that, I can't give any advice on how to meet women or how to improve that aspect of their life.
No.
But all I can talk about is, I can say categorically that I guess how you do something is pretty much as important as why you're doing it. You're looking at how to. I look at the big picture of trying to make goals actively happen, and from there good things happen. Will you find a relationship? I don't know. I can't give you a guarantee there. But you look at the process. You've got to remove goals that are in conflict with what you want, and you identify that by looking at these goals that they're coming from a lack of personal honesty, or they're coming from a place of you trying to seek social approval. So you can readily identify those things. So, okay, those goals are in conflict with where I want to get to. And it could be a small goal. So, and again, you want to have a strong why. You want to pursue goals that are intrinsically motivating. Then you develop an approach. And from that, when guys, like older guys, I see when they develop an approach, what they're trying to do is create habits to create momentum. So they're trying to activate positive emotions and behaviors, not negative ones, and they learn from their mistakes. But they've got to look at it. Is your life designed around you trying to avoid unpleasant situations and unpleasant, emotions? You've got to face that head on. It's, all I see is a lot of avoidance and deflection.
And a lot of them are waiting to be motivated to do anything. Whereas a lot of times, like you said, the routines and simply just the routines themselves and just the simple act of deciding that you want to do something, not being forced, but it's actually something you want to do. The act of actually deciding to do it over and over again and develop a routine and get up for something, that actually fuels motivation. Motivation doesn't come before. Happiness, motivation, will, that comes from starting the engine. But if you just sort of sit there idle, the engine will rust without you actually just taking to it like you do. Like some guys will, friends of mine, they'll say, "Oh, well, you're lucky. You're lucky. You keep in shape, or you read." And as though someone handed me that, I said, I treat reading and working out like washing the dishes. I just sort of, it's a momentary thing. Like, I can't be bothered. Let me just start it. And it's like writing. When I'm not in the mood, I know that my brain is trying to convince me to be lazy and not serve my best interest. And so I tell myself, okay, let me just start it. If after 1 minute or after 2 minutes I still don't want to do it, I've given myself permission to stop. And usually what happens is I write for 1 or 2 hours. And I know that's going to happen. And it's the same with everything else, whether it's exercise, whether it's like passions and callings. Like, there's stuff you like to do, and people will tell you. I'm sure you'll have guys that you work with. You'll ask them what are your hobbies or what you like to do, and they'll get glints in their eyes and they'll tell you about what they're really into. But then when it comes to time to actually give that thing time, they don't. And that's another important part of relationships, because people, like, now it's become, relationships just mean relationships with women. Men don't actually see that they can actually have a relationship with their calling, or with what they're passionate about, or with a really great relationship with their routines. Anything you spend a lot of time with, you have a relationship with. It's as simple as that. And it's the guys online as well. If your relationship is just sitting on forums and bitching about women and hating the world, guess what your relationship is? That's the kind of relationship you have. And you'll get the results of that kind of relationship too. So you really just need to sort of take that one step towards what you know is right. And if it helps you, give yourself permission to stop doing it after 5 minutes if it's no good. But 9 times out of 10, you'll keep doing it and you'll be grateful you forced yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, human beings. The male animal he's not just a sum of parts. He's one whole. When you change any part of that system, of that machine, you're going to simultaneously change the whole. So you can't change a part of you without fundamentally changing everything. So, when one area of your life is completely out of alignment, we know that every other aspect of your life is going to suffer.
Yeah.
So you can't compartmentalize it. I mean, everything that you do, all your goals, all your ideals, the way that you view life and all the rest of it, and your interactions, your relationships, all of it should, it should be a synergy. It should support and propel all these other goals and all these parts of your life forward. So it should ideally simultaneously facilitate greater success in other aspects of your life. That should be the roll-on effect. That's momentum. That's good habits. That's good networks.
Yeah, you start operating from that base, then you start approaching everything else in your life from that base as well.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, I needed pocket money. So I rocked up to the shops down the road and I started asking around. I said, what do you guys need? So I knew there was this Chinese guy who ran a factory down the road. I knew him through my father. And this guy used to import stuff. And I saw he had some T-shirts and all, but I said, I could take those. I could flip those off. How much you want for them? So I bought a whole box of T-shirts. I rocked up to the screen printer up the road and I started selling them to him. I was selling them at like 4 times the price. He said, can you give me some more T-shirts? So the rest of it. So I built up a network like that. And for me, that was just, I always did that throughout my life. I'll identify a need. I'll create a network. I'll go from there. And just little things like that ever since I was a kid. And that's something practical that I've always tried to implement and then carry through on in my life.
I wanted to ask you a question. Do you think, and I'm pretty sure it's generational, the world we grew up with, because I'm sure you and I would have grown up with jumping on our push bikes and riding around and climbing trees and hanging out with friends and building tree forts and things like that, none of which the generation now do. That's a Huckleberry Finn story. Yeah. So a lot of that's kind of, you had a lot of action imbued in your entertainment and finding yourself. Now there's very little action in the experience of someone who's brought up in today's times. And so that being able to crank that engine and understand, like you said, like I think it's another reason why women nag men. Like, it's like she's something that cranks men engine to give them momentum to be able to do something that later on they're actually proud that they actually got off their ass and did. But then when you ask them to crank their own engine, they have no reference point. If a woman's not motivating them, it's kind of like, then what's the point? You know, why do I need to work if I'm not going to get married, if I'm not going to have children? And that's an important question to ask, but it's a painful one too. It's kind of like, well, I thought I loved my career. I thought I liked buying cars. I thought I liked going on holidays. It's kind of hits you now that's like, no, I only liked it because the female was involved. What do I like? And then all of a sudden you're left with this void of, I don't even know who the fuck I am.
Yeah, no identity. Sounds hard for a lot of...
I was going to say, like, in terms of what you described about your upbringing and the action you took and what you learned from that tactile, self-generated sort of state that you had, how can you get guys today to understand that?
Well, it's a completely different beast online. That's the problem. You know, with the guys I work with face to face, that's fine. I can get these guys. I can sort of fall back on sort of all the motivational techniques that I've tried to use with these guys. Try to break down all the walls and get them, you know, have that state of just generalized cycle of resentment, anger, and fear, you know, and provide consistency, provide structure. These guys are going to come in and they're going to test me. Okay, you come and test me. I sure I've got backbone. And once they see that, then they trust me, they respect me. So it's guys from a different kind of environment. So a lot of these guys, I don't think they've come from that kind of environment. So I guess it's kind of tough in how to reach them. All I can say is you got to look inside. You got to look at your behaviour patterns. You got to look at your attitudes. You know, your thought patterns, that sort of thing. But you know, facing them, feeling them, dealing with them, healing from them, all that stuff. But I can say that till I'm blue in the face. But how do I put that across to them? How do I reach them? I'm not quite sure.
And I was just thinking about the metaphor of, like, say for instance, back in the day, you could, if you wanted to teach a guy the benefits of boxing, you could teach him. But today it's trying to teach the guy to box, but you're not allowed to hit him. You know,
you see the parents,
yeah, like the language with which you could help them, you're not allowed to use, and they say, well, use something else. It's like, but it's the only language that will resonate with this person. This is what the male needs, but it's female language is the only one I'm permitted. But unfortunately, I'm sorry, it doesn't work with a male.
No,
it's a very hard way to do it. I think about the only way you can do it is, which is sort of beneficial in the going part of going your own way, is actually show yourself going in the language you use, be the example, and then if it opens a door with a man, if he starts engaging and being interested enough, then that interest might help him absorb what he needs to do and how he needs to change. It's the words and what we're permitted to sort of how we're permitted to train and teach is now very different. The environment's very different.
Yeah. What I find is that the guys that you can't perform miracles, so I want to meet that guy at a stage where, meet him where he is motivationally. Where is he at? I'm going to get him to ease up, but I'd start reflecting all his feelings, his fear, his anger, all his concerns, and trying to dig away and find those little golden nuggets in a pile of shit, trying to find some motivation, some eventual acceptance of where he's at. So you've got to listen, you've got to accept, you've got to reflect. But work from there. But, it's about taking time to understand where they're at from their perspective. I appreciate that. But we want to be working in the same team, as opposed to the team that he wants to obliterate. So that's typically what I deal with. And for me, that's as, as standard as a block toilet is to a plumber. I understand that. And how to deal with those guys from those backgrounds. But online, it's a bit different. So, I have concerns about it.
Do you, how do you adjust your approach to helping a guy when you clearly see a different kind of personality that you're not used to? So what I'm saying is, like, you're probably exposed to guys where you see their language and how they're posturing, and you can sort of read them to a certain degree, and okay, I know how to talk to this guy. Or another guy comes in, you know how to communicate with him. What happens when there's something very foreign, like a guy's talking and acting a certain way, that you go, I don't even know how I can help this guy. I don't know how to talk to him. His language, his approach, his energy, everything's just something I can't latch onto. How do you help those kind of guys?
Yeah, I mean, I've dealt with a lot of guys. When you're looking at mental health, especially in the prison environment and some of the community outreach, a lot of these guys, sometimes it's the majority of any group that you go on, they've got serious mental issues. A lot of them may be like BPD borderline. Some guys have schizoaffective, and I'm like, well, what are you doing here? But there's a whole raft of different mental issues and personality issues that these guys have, and you've got to understand that at the drop of a hat they can just click and flip. So you've got to try and keep them present in that moment. A lot of that is what you're trying to do. You're trying to establish that normalcy. So I've always dealt with the extreme end of that. If I'm looking at a guy, say he's acting in a way that's sheepish or he's closed off or what have you, and I can see that something's going on for him, I'd soften my approach, definitely. And I'd want to be taking a really gradual, step-by-step approach with him and with inviting other mentors in to deal with him in a way that's, I've got to mentor them at the same time they're mentoring him. Soften the language, soften your approach. Because a lot of these guys are ex-convicts and, they've got a big tattoo on their face and all the rest. It can be a bit intimidating.
How do you know if a guy needs tough love or the soft approach?
He'll come in testing. He'll puff his chest out and all the rest of it. Yep. So, okay, we've got a problem child, we've got to bust through that. Right. And that's easy. I mean, when they get into a state of, they're fluctuating between what I see from hyperreactive to hypoactive. So they're paranoid, they're kicking up, they want to fight the world because it's coming from a place of fear. And then they'll come into hyporeactive, and they'll completely shut down. I remember working in some of the groups I had, and this guy, one of the toughest men I've ever met, ex-gang member, and he went on to, he became a tradie. So he did quite well in the outside world eventually. But I remember this group that we had. And what we did is we got the guys to like curl up little bits of toilet paper into a little ball. And they started throwing it at him. I said, just stand there, just take it. Because we worked on this guy for months and months and months to get him to a point where he felt relaxed and, he could engage in the process. But they'd throw these little bits of tissue at him. And he'd get angry. And he'd start yelling at them, and then the yelling stopped. And then his head dropped. And then his whole body just sort of caved in on itself. And then we brought him out of it. And I kept him out of the prison environment for at least a week. I checked in on him, we talked about it, and said thank you. I met him again when he was in the outside world, and he said it was the only thing that broke through for me. I'd hurt so many people, I'd done this, I'd destroyed lives. That was the one thing that got through to me. So things like that, they can have a dramatic impact.
It's really sort of amazing that stuff's so hidden that it's almost a fluke sometimes that you eventually break through with something seemingly innocuous. But that's the thing that breaks through. And I imagine it'd be the same with a lot of guys online that are struggling with certain things. And all it takes is a certain person's voice saying things in a certain way. And I've said this to guys when they say that, well, everything's already been said in the manosphere. And I'll say, A, it needs to be repeated. Because if, for instance, if you made a well thought out video on a certain topic, or Barbarossa may have before you, that stuff gets lost in the archive. And it dies because no one will go back that far, and it's not promoted. It's lost in the digital past. The only thing that's kept alive is the latest video. So I tell guys it's incumbent on you to come up with your own ideas. Don't parrot. Don't sort of be a cliche generator where you just talk about hypergamy and whatever, and you're using the words that everyone else uses. Come up with your own thoughts. Mentor, use words where you're learning and expressing your own self, and then people can see a new take on a similar position. And what happens is a personality that may not have had the light bulb switch on with yourself or with Barbarossa suddenly has it switch on with you talking about that subject simply because a different personality is talking about it. All it takes is sometimes a different personality or a moment or an inflection of a certain word or a phrase to finally create a religious moment in a person where they finally get it.
Yeah, that's right. It's like, that was the effect that Barbarossa had on me with the first video I saw of his. I'll always mention it, the post-feminism man, but my initial reaction to that was, what the hell is this? I mean, it really hit home, but I just didn't want to accept it. You know, the fact that it was on a computer, if it was a book, I would have thrown it across the room. I would have said no. I said, bullshit, no. It's like you've completely stripped me down. You've taken all my defenses away and you've left me with nothing. Thank you very much. I'm completely vulnerable and exposed now. You know, I felt indignant about it. I was quite angry over it. Yeah. And then I just kept returning to his work and returning, and then Stardusk came along and it was man, woman, myth, and it was just all this information it was revelatory at the time. It was just pulling the curtain back and all this information. It was amazing to watch. I'd never experienced anything like that. It was reflecting everything I thought at the time and then unveiling all this additional information and all these theories and this philosophy. It's just, yeah, I mean, it really was a great time. I think it was around, when I got into it, around 2012. And those guys have been going for a number of years prior to that. But, yeah, amazing time.
And I think that's at the heart of it. It's someone else articulating what you feel. Yeah. That you never had the words to put together, and all of a sudden a phrase solidifies everything. And and that's why when they say everything, I've said all I have to say. If you, for one, need to keep your own mental muscles alive on certain subjects, because I know I could kind of really reveal something and it sticks in my mind. But after a few weeks or a month, it kind of, you go on autopilot and it sort of starts to go towards the recesses of your mind and you're not sort of exercising it. So being able to speak about them and practice them in real life, whether they're in front of women or other people where you're having a contentious issue and standing up for your values, it's important to keep exercising your values and beliefs. Otherwise, if they're kind of safely just tucked back, gathering dust in your mind, you'll go on biological autopilot and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm pregnant. It's like, oh, fuck, how did that happen? Like, oh, yeah, I remember, like, women, this, that. Why didn't I pull that mental book out of my shelf and exercise some of that? Because it is very important. Not being obsessive about it. And that's why when, like, whether it's you or other people say, well, you know, I've already talked about that. But there's also, we might have talked about it 5 years ago where we were at the time with our language then. You know, I think it's also interesting, and I've been thinking about doing this, some important subjects that I may have covered intensely a couple of years ago. It'd be interesting to actually revisit them now and elucidate who you are now with your experience now and see what comes out. Twofold, to keep the important point alive, and the second is to give it another mind, like another human, another mature human with the last 3 years experience now elucidating, you know, what he thinks is still true, what he's willing to shave off, you know, basically sharpening the opinion chronologically. And so you'll have the point of reference of me 3 years ago saying what I felt about a certain subject, and now you'll have the revised version of what he thinks. And it can kind of help men across different stages in life, I think.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of, like, I haven't kept up to that at all in terms of the content that's online now. I mean, I never really understood the term MGTOW, other than it's sort of, it's just appreciating your value and moving towards goals. That was about it. And not compromising in regards to your financial or such and such. But how has that evolved? I mean, what has that turned into over the last few years? I mean, how has that progressed or devolved or?
Well, I'd say it's, in my mind, it's devolved, but to other people, it might be the best thing since video games, because it seems to resemble video games much more than what it was when we talk about the golden era of MGTOW. The glib answer I give when anyone who doesn't know anything about MGTOW, I say MGTOW is a man who's cheated a woman out of a divorce. But the serious answer is, it's just, to me, mental fitness. It's basically helping men to think. That's at the heart of it for me, and that's why I approach each of my videos more philosophically, because the best way for a man to get healthy is to think for himself and think really righteously, strongly and clearly. I mean, you can talk about any subject you want. You can specialize in any corner. You can sort of lean more scientifically. But I think at the heart of MGTOW today, it's about men thinking clearly in light of the gynocentric world around them and the challenges they face that we perhaps didn't face in the way they do. But yeah, it has changed. It's changed a fair bit. Like I said, I started to, I think I was watching videos a couple of years before I started producing them, like your stuff and Barbarossa's and Stardust and all the people we tend to cite. And I sort of came on, and as a lot of you guys bowed out, but I came on with the mindset of being involved with the online forum MGTOW guys, the founders, back in the early 2000s. I took a break and, was doing various things in my life, and then I started actually watching more YouTube. I was getting sicker and sicker of television, and I started to find, I can find anything I want to watch on YouTube. It's great. It's like a place with a million channels. And then I started to obviously watch things like, philosophical videos and people, individuals talk, listening to individuals talk about their thoughts unfiltered, uncommercially, honest, person to person. And then I stumbled across MGTOW videos. I said, I remember this. Are these guys doing videos online themselves? And it was none of the guys I knew. It was all these new guys using the label. And I thought, well, it's evolved. I assumed it was a progression of what I was involved with, and it's now migrated to a new medium. That's all it was. The conversation was still continuing. And when I discovered the guys we mentioned, I thought, they're interested intellectually in the topic, which is what we were doing back then as well. And so then by the time I sort of got the fortitude to say, I can throw something into the ring as well. I mean, by heart, I'm a writer and I've got a lot of ideas. And so by the time I did that, then it kind of changed. As I came in, I think Stardust took a step to the side and just started making different videos. So I think it just organically changed, and people had their own reasons for leaving. Right. But with that vacuum, it was just the Lord of the Flies thing, where the rudderless kids were trying to teach each other by a lot of macho posturing, and it's become a kind of video game now. It's the intellectual side has sort of really diluted, and if at all it comes back, it's in cliches. You'll hear guys spout words and lines from Barbarossa when they talk about certain intellectual issues, but they themselves, I don't really see them coming up with articulated, well-written, thought-out phrases and ideas, thinking, that's a cool way of thinking about it, or you've furthered the idea, you've expanded the library of MGTOW, so to speak. But it's not. It's kind of like they're playing with the same toy and they're not building on anything.
Yeah. Are they articulating experiences? I mean, is it just sort of, is it just, sound bites from previous?
A lot of sound bites. They're reflecting on them, but like I said before, the self is not there. Whereas with yourself and Stardusk and Barbarossa, a lot of the individual was there, and people think that's just personality. Well, they might say, well, it's easy for you because you're confident, whatever. No, that's one part, but it's I'm speaking from me. I'm directing my experiences out to you. I think this is important. I is coming out, but what I hear from these guys is them. This isn't fair. That's not fair. I don't want to do anything. The only I that comes in is a passive one. So the active language is all apophatic, is all blaming, it's all reactionary, it's all fear, it's all I don't want to do anything. There's no actual forward movement or action, and it translates into the words they use in their videos. There's no momentum in their language either. It's all very static, and it's like when you hear people just talking in cliches and saying nothing. They don't really have a personality to sort of convey. It's similar to what you said about sitting across the table from a date these days. They don't have an individual thought process in real time telling you what they really think about this. And then you see an individual comes alive. Like, here's a human being talking to me. There's life. I can point to life now. This person's talking to me. I feel an experience being relayed to me by a human being. But these people are mouthpieces for Barbarossa and you. And they're there is a sense of emptiness. They really don't see themselves, and they don't talk from the first person at all. Yeah,
it's a shame. It's, you can fall into using that as a justification for not acting, which, it's harmful long term, but it's, like you talked about resentment before, identifying your part, how you contributed to the problem. And it speaks to what you were talking about, building resilience and learning to stand up for yourself and having boundaries and those sorts of things. You do that through experience. I mean, it's the only way that you can do it. You learn that language through experience. You can identify things, look back on experience and say, well, I never spoke up for myself. You need to be honest about that. Willing to admit it, otherwise you're going to get stuck, and you're going to get stuck in all that kind of dysregulation. You're going to be thinking back on that time that you didn't stand up for yourself and you didn't put that person in their place and you should have said this, and it's going to be on repeat. And you're going to feel a great deal of shame over that. I've seen that with men. And it's concerning to me that guys, they're not going out there, they're not experiencing it, they're not standing up for themselves. You can say what you want about Jordan Peterson, but there was, and I say a lot about him too, but there's one little nugget that I heard, and he said, just stand up for yourself. He said, speak up for yourself. He said, even if you're wrong, do it. Now, I don't advise that in the workplace. There's no way to do it. But I can get what he's meaning. It's like, find a way to state what you're feeling, even if you can't find the words. But do it in a way that you're going to feel empowered by doing that, rather than taking all this bullshit from people and allowing people to step on you. After time, you're going to be carved out of stone. And for most men, they walk that path. And that's experience. It's repetition in the workplace, outside the workplace, relationships. That's how it comes about.
Don't you find it amazing today that the actual concept of action has become really scary and foreign to men, where that's the actual basis where a lot of men's actualized fulfillment comes from. Like, until they act, it's not actually real. It's always amorphous. I mean, I think the reason why men tend to be more intelligent, have written the best novels and are more philosophically inclined and have sort of created that history, is that's the precursor to action. So they've created the maps so that they can go out into the world and chart the world. Like, like charting the map and packing your stuff before you're Christopher Columbus and you sail across the sea. There's a lot of thinking that has to happen just before the action, because the action is the meat of it all. Whereas now it's kind of like just circular thinking, lazy thinking, angry and emotional thinking, but there's no real destination I hear in the language of men today where they're actually going to go on the adventure. It's all prep and no adventure. And it's very safe to do so because you don't have to. Like, why should I go on an adventure? I can play a video game. Why should I go on an adventure? I can watch porn. Why should I make a movie if I can watch them? Why should I write a book if I can download it on Kindle and read the Cliff Notes, or go on quote.com and read the quotes of Marcus Aurelius rather than reading his meditations? It's kind of just a lot of inaction, a lot of lack of will, and it's that muscle that is atrophying, and convincing men that the last thing you want to do is act because there's no point. Look at women, look at the world, see, it's logical, men. We're speaking your language. There's no point because you won't get anywhere. But the defiance, the masculine defiance to do what you want to do because it's right, I think sometimes supersedes a rational risk as well. If the risk is too big, like half of marriages end in divorce and 2/3 of them initiated by women, that's fair enough. That's just objectively sane. But when, like you mentioned, like if you write it down on paper and you could visually see how not afraid you are, but how just lazy and inert you are. It's nothing to do with fear. You're convincing yourself it's fear and rationalizing, but you're just being sort of inert and lazy, and you're not giving yourself I mean, don't you deserve to feel alive? Like there's going to be plenty of time for silence, fellas.
Yeah.
Like you haven't got much time for non-silence and inaction. Like, if anything, it should be the opposite. But the propaganda to get men rationally to consider inertia as the most rational approach, I think, has been overdone. It's a nice, sophisticated trick that most men, I think, have fallen for.
Yeah, and it is a trap. I mean, it's been fed to them on a silver platter. You could say it's by design. I don't know. But, I mean, I know with working with juvenile offenders and that sort of thing, the approach that I always took was, I'd look at restorative practices, as opposed to zero tolerance policies. You'd lay down the boundaries and limitations and all the rest of it. They'd understand that. You want to challenge their relationship to authority, get a place where they can confront each other in a supportive way and all the rest of it. So you do all kinds of active things to get them out there, working on the tools, all the rest of it, exercises, boxing, even throwing some meditation, some mindfulness exercises. But it gets them to a place where it really does sort of repair, their belief in fairness. They've got all that resentment and all those feelings of injustice and the world's unfair and all the rest of it, but you see how something works together and they're working together as men. And it shows them how to conduct themselves with integrity. They've never had that before. They've never had balance. They've never had structure. They've never gotten positive feedback, all the rest of it. So I can see that has a dramatic effect on their lives, and it's very impactful. You can get to all those underlying issues. You can promote healthy behaviors and communication skills, and it gets them to a point where they're really empowered, and they have the language, and they have the experience, and they have the support network. That's what it should be.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's a shame that the language of men is not spoken to be able to help guys kind of see who they are as men anymore. It's like they're trying to find out who they are as men through a female language. And but the thing is, in terms of action, things like honor, trust, respect, kindness. Like I said, let's face it, men like doing good. Men like contributing. We feel really good when we do that. But the fact that we mistrust so much that there's nowhere to put our trust and our actions and our goodness into, because it's rationally insane to do so. We're not fools. I can feel noble when I do something noble, but I don't want to do something stupid. I can feel honourable when I do something honourable, but not something reckless and stupid and something that's not befitting of a man that other men wouldn't respect. It's not just that a woman wouldn't respect me, other men wouldn't respect me either. So all of that language and that interaction has been kind of stripped away. There's not only no spaces left to do it with men because we basically need to let women in as well, but the language itself negates men being able to speak these things too. I mean, there's this stuff that we're doing in online, men are still finding their way. Nature will find a way, but we have to keep playing musical chairs to keep the language of masculinity alive, lest men perish.
So there's a quote by Norman Mailer. He said the definition of masculinity is winning small battles with honour. When I was a kid, I remember reading that. I didn't know what the hell he was on about, but it became more apparent as I got older. But you're right about the language. It's become censored, and it's like a man can't really unleash himself in any kind of environment now because it's just deemed as aggressive and hateful and all the rest of it. No, he's just being passionate. He's engaged. I've seen what that looks like, and it's scary to people that haven't seen that, because all of that's just cut off.
Well, he's being more female, where he's just emoting and acting on the emotions, whereas before, a man makes sense of himself and the world by understanding it first. And typically you understand it through language. You assess it, you calibrate it, and then you follow the best course of action for yourself and whatever your trajectory is. But if you can't even think that way now and you can't use certain words, and the in thing is to be in the moment, man, and, consider women, and you can't just be for men, you need to be for everyone and women and children. And it's kind of you can't actually calibrate and act as a man So it's really hard for guys like before I can convince myself that I can do something, and I know I have the skills better to do it than a female, you're not even allowing me to exercise any muscles to do it the best I can. And as a man, I feel more confident when I do it the best way a man can. Yeah. And if I can't actually do it that way, you're asking me to do it without thinking, you're asking me to do it when I'm angry, then the results aren't going to be good. No. Because all the Stoic teachings negate the emotional side. They tell you how to overcome, reevaluate, or change the language where you're doing something with intellect and focus and stability, and then the action that results from that's going to be that much healthier. But if you approach everything in life like a female, but you're a man, your life's going to be that much worse. Women can do that, and their lives will not going to change that much. No. But if we start operating like a female without our own language and acting it through ethics, it's just a scary time. Geez, I'm passionate about it. So for me, I fight for it. But when I see guys in their language and they just kind of give up physically in their lives and they can barely get out of bed, and what's the point? I can't even be bothered playing my favorite video game anymore. It's like, God, like, what does it take, cattle prod, to make you care about your life?
Yeah. And it's quite alarming that a lot of these guys are so young. What I'm seeing with these guys, and they're kind of just adopting one meme. It's not even a whole sort of raft of ideas or philosophical theories or anything. It's just the one meme. It's over. And it's like, because the woman looked at you with disgust at the cafe. Well, I've seen guys be on the receiving end of that. A woman may smile at me or what have you, and the friend behind me, she gets hostile with them. That's completely out of your control. You can't control how they're going to look at you or how they're going to engage with you. Women today, a lot of them are very toxic. I mean, we can't control that. We know this. Why would you bother? It's hard for me to understand the value that they attribute, but again, it's kind of turning these women into like Madonna. It's like the centerpiece of their life.
Well, it's the only way a lot of men are trying to find out how to be a good man is through what women ask them to be. Whereas before, like, man up, when it came from your father or elder, was be better. And I'm a man, so I get you. I'm not trying to manipulate you. I care about you. I want you to be a better version of me or be like me. I'm like, when an elder would tell a younger person to man up through tough love or whatever the lessons he's giving, there's this understanding that he's trying to give himself as an elder man, and the same thing in my videos when I talk, I'm trying to give a younger version of myself a second chance. And so when a man tells a younger man to man up, like all of us have in our videos or directly in your own life, if you're lucky enough to have an elder, his manning up is not shameful. It's tough love of be stronger, be better. I want to be proud of you. When a woman says manned up, it's just shame-based. It's you're not good enough. There's always a long way to go. No matter how much money you have, I'm always going to roll my eyes. You're always wrong and I'm always right. So it's a very different interpretation of man up or be better. And if women are the only ones today teaching men how to be when, and like the media is telling you, a good man does X, Y, and Z, it's all very impotent and shame-based, and it's no wonder men have turned out like this, like very meek, apologetic for just being men, like men identifying as feminists. It's not just the word MGTOW, like there are some women that are sympathetic to MGTOW, but they don't identify as MGTOW. They can't. But somehow men think they can identify heart and soul as a feminist. Like how much has masculinity disappeared?
Yeah, when you think like that,
I know, to me it's kind of like all it takes is for what's the saying, for evil to sort of win is for good men to do nothing. And if I don't do something good, if I don't at least talk to a younger version of myself and stand up for myself, and just by consequence, a younger version of me out there listening to this, because there's bound to be, statistically there's bound to be.
Yeah.
Imagine there was none of us making videos. and I'm sure you had it as well. I get, and this isn't to sort of pump up my tires or anything, but I get weekly to monthly videos, messages from people, guys telling me I've helped them through X, Y, and Z. I was about to do this and I didn't. I was about to make this mistake and I came across your video or Stardusk's or somebody else's, and it really opened my eyes. And I saw exactly how my wife or whoever was leading me towards the edge, and I would have actually done what she wanted in a week if I hadn't come across that. Or I was thinking of, ending it, and I came across your video and you helped me see things. You helped me see myself for once. Like, that stuff's great. I wish, I would have loved that feeling or that light bulb or that help while I was stumbling through things, that voice or that arm on my shoulder when I felt like I was alone and the woman was a tyrant and nobody gave a shit. Even the people around me, my family members and friends, just, well, that's women. That's the only advice I got. Yet now there's someone, if you can reach a guide saying, no, that's not women. I understand you completely. I was there. That stuff's invaluable. Yeah,
absolutely. There's so many men out there that, same thing. The messages I got, guys telling me that they were going to attempt suicide and all the rest of it, and they were going through relationship breaks, all that kind of stuff. The same thing. And what it means is there's a lot of guys out there that are in that position, have come through it, have found value in their lives and moved on, which is great. I think I said in one of my videos, I steered into the abyss myself, but, we decided to go our own way. I was there myself. I know a lot of guys there. That was when I was younger. But a lot of men have walked down that dark path, and they walked down that dark path alone. A lot of my videos focused on male isolation. It was profound then, and since the beginning systematically worse. But what we're seeing now is, again, what we had back then. The guys internalized the message in terms of the lack of self-worth, but that message has now become augmented, and they're telling themselves that they're of no use, which is another step further.
And I think what also helped is that there were a lot of mentors that guys could pick and choose from and cherry pick, whereas these days online there aren't. Like if for instance, Stardusk or myself or one or two others don't speak to you, then you don't get much and you kind of just move on in your life and you still sort of keep stumbling over the same speed bumps in your life, and, you could sort of step in a bear trap. But it reminds me of, I think it was Marcus Aurelius was in his meditations or somewhere else, he was saying his teachers were never one man. His teachers, like, he'd thank one man, like, he'd thank Maximus for teaching him the value of doing what is essential. And he'd thank his mother for teaching him whether it was patience or something, and he'd thank someone else for teaching him this. And so having an abundance of elders and teachers, and I mean, your enemies can be teachers too, but having them there, people better than you, in a lot of respects, to cherry pick from and then develop your own language. That's great. That actually seems more authentic rather than I'm lost and Spetsnaz or human, they're about the only one that I kind of get, so I'll try and pantomime everything they're saying and try and adopt their language. It's like, because there's nothing else around. Either I take them wholesale or I have nothing. Whereas I think we need more teachers to help more men because there's a dearth of it.
Yeah. I think taking on board what you said earlier, sort of revisiting work and that sort of thing, I've thought about that, and it's back then I was talking to men who I think it clicked with them, it resonated because that was their experience. They go, okay, that's familiar. I get that, I'm experienced. I think that, I feel that, I get it. But for a lot of guys today, I don't think they'd have anywhere near that kind of frame of reference. And it comes down to a lack of sort of socialization, a lack of social landmarks and exposure to those things. So I think it'd be something quite different. Maybe they wouldn't have that frame of reference. Maybe they wouldn't be able to find the starting line. So it'd be about getting to that point, building that foundation.
Yeah, because you kind of have a fundamental mistrust of people your own age. Like you remember what's like. You hang out with your friends. Like you can sort of throw around ideas, but you're having a conversation, but you're well aware you're posturing. Like you don't let your friend strong arm you. Whereas there's a submission to an elder or someone who's got experience who's older, where you'll be humble and you'll listen to objective strength and age and wisdom. Whereas if you're just learning from each other, which most men are today, you're not going to actually mature and be intelligent and make better decisions. You're just going to sort of posture and be tough and try and win. You're not going to learn humbleness. You're not going to learn fortitude. You're not going to learn the old ways. You're not going to learn the things that have been passed on from generation to generation.
And there's a lot of, of course you see it as well, the policing. So especially if women are present, and the police are on thoughts and actions. And I see it with gang members, but they're watching for signs of weakness. With males and sort of everyday society, they're watching for signs of political incorrectness, and so they can chastise you and puff their chest out, and then they can act like a peacock. So there's a lot of that going on too. But it's like with the older guys. I learned that in boxing. The guys in the 60s and 70s, they come down and impart knowledge. But that was life changing for a lot of guys. And you get the guys on the floor that will sit by Legu. I was one of them. Just listen to it, listen to the stories.
Well, what was that saying? Like, I think it was Einstein. Like, he said he stood on the shoulders of giants. Like, there's no giants that anyone can stand on the shoulders on. So no one can see very far at all now. There's nothing to stand on. I think that's an important thing. Like, not to mention even history. Like, they're already in today's language. It's like anything historical is patriarchal or old-fashioned. So we're not even going to look at the books. Like, there's always a fault to find in history. So we're always making up the language in real time now. And unfortunately, the language now is all female feeling based. And there's very little of that a man can kind of respond to. He wants to know why. And the whys usually come from the past. It comes from experience. The why isn't a roll of the dice. That's chance and cross your fingers. I hope the universe catches me kind of bullshit. But understanding the why comes from the past, comes from the shoulders of giants.
It's interesting. It's like I said to Stardusk. I said, in no time in my life have I ever seen guys asking why as much as they are right now. And conversely, women jumping up and down and screaming as much as they are. And it's guys, it could be tradies, everyday guys. They're asking all these questions. They don't know anything about the manosphere. Yeah. They can see that things aren't fair.
Have you noticed that as well over the last couple of years? I've noticed it too, where I'm noticing what used to just be MGTOW or manosphere language actually either being used directly out in public with people, or the same questions and talking points are being, whereas it maybe 7 or so years ago, it wasn't the case. This was kind of like MGTOW used to be sort of like an intellectual arena where I could privately better myself for the world outside. Whereas there's such a hunger for it that the questions are starting to pop out outside in the world.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, what happened with technology? Tinder, online dating, all the rest of it, this is waking guys up. Then they try to encroach in gaming, they try to encroach on sports and the media, movies, all this. It's waking guys up to feminism, which they didn't know anything about before. That, they're looking at intrinsic female nature and all the rest of it, and they're saying, well, the women aren't giving me the time of day, and they're being really disrespectful. I walk in, I try to get a drink or talk to a waitress, and she's disrespectful to me. You see that? And I've gone in with guys, and I say, you're sitting with them. I say, you go up now. You go talk to her. This is watch this. You go, see that? See how sour she was? This is a group of tradies. So, yeah, it's happening all the time, and guys are waking up and they're sharing information, and it is, in a way, bringing guys together. I'm seeing guys hang out more and, interact more because, well, A, they can't get a look in, and B, they really don't want to dumpster dive. So it's a combination of the two.
But it's funny where, like, I've noticed that too. You're in public and the guys will ask these questions and get frustrated, like you say, the waitress, and they're getting frustrated with a point, like, oh, she's acting this way, and it doesn't piss you off about women. And my first reaction is, you're asking me to tell you about hypergamy. You're asking me to tell you about female nature. Like, I'm thinking, this is amazing. Like, these guys are asking questions that only the manosphere can answer. And I never experienced it before.
Yeah, no, it's very prevalent now, and I've seen it with guys from all walks of life. And, maybe it used to just be with the guys that would come out of nasty relationships and divorces, they go about it that way, I can understand. But it's younger guys now, which I haven't seen before, and these guys don't even know about PUA. They don't know about any of sort of the manosphere content at all. But yeah, I mean, it's coming out every day.
Mm. Well, in one way or another, I mean, there's a lot of different factions within the manosphere, but I just think that more of it should just be talked about. I don't think guys should really sort of try and debate other parts of the manosphere. Like, I don't think there's any growth in trying to tear down whether it's the MRAs or whatever. Like, the more we can have, and let's face it, whether it's PUA, MRA, MGTOW, FA, incels, but like, the central point is there's very familiar talking points that all men are frustrated, and there's a cross-section of familiar topics. Like, we tend to be mostly on the same page. We just take different perspectives on it, and we've got different ideas of how we should act and how we should sort of philosophize and articulate it and what we think the answer should be. But the actual problems, I think they're common amongst all the factions, more or less.
Yeah.
But, look, I don't want to keep you too long, man. I really appreciate you taking the time. Okay. You don't have any pheromone soap you want to sell or tell people about or anything like that?
No.
But yeah, thanks for spending the time, man. It's a pleasure. I've actually never spoken to you, but I've watched a lot of your videos, and I really I missed the chance to actually speak to you while you were there. Like I said, I was on my way in as you were on your way out.
Yeah. Well, I've watched some of your content. I've been floored by some of it. Some of your insights are just great, and I think there's a lot there that guys can digest and come back to, and sort of it's sort of nuggets of information there that you can take, digest piece at a time, and you've got the kind of work that guys can return to, which is great.
Yeah, it's like we said, it's about the thinking. The thinking's about the only thing they can't take away from us. You learn to think better, you learn to sort of articulate better, and you learn to stand up for yourself. So it's at heart, it's the best thing we can kind of do, because there's so much stuff we're not allowed to do anymore.
Yeah, and I would say to like some of the younger guys watching now, just what I always try to say is just have compassion for yourself. You know, and I realise a lot of things are unfair, but dwelling on unfairness, it doesn't do anything to change it. And you get into that sort of obsessive thinking, all it does is just going to kick you in the ass. You've got to start focusing on solutions as opposed to problems, and you know those little goals that you want to get achieved.
In terms of like what you mentioned about treating yourself well, I tell guys as well, it's like because some of them really don't treat themselves well. They're a bit too self-abasing. It's like, I don't deserve that. Like, it's somehow wimpy to care about yourself. It's not masculine. Yet the world's trampling all over you. And I think, like, okay, imagine who's someone what's a male person in your life that you would die for? Is it your brother or your best friend or your father? Like, just pick someone. Who's the person you would die for or give anything for or fight anybody for? Pick someone. And they pick them, and I said, okay, now imagine you're them. Start fighting for yourself like you would that person you value. Like, put yourself in the place of someone you die for and stand up for. Fight to sort of stay alive in that aspect.
Yeah, recognising a lot is out of the control. I mean, the more they focus on compassion, the less room there is for anger. You know, it's getting to the point of acceptance, and there's nothing wrong with treating yourself and being kind to yourself.
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff, for instance, a lot of the language you and I speak to, we might be a little bit older, and a lot of guys will listen to it and they'll think it's poetic, or what Spetsnaz said, like that's very poetic, I've got to write that down. But in terms of the meaning of it, for them to get there, they need to understand the basics. You talk about sort of self-care, and so do I, and thinking for yourself, but how important is it for you to sort of see sunlight? Is just recognise those little parts.
Yeah, and so many guys I see, it's just a slow burner effect. You know, they try to white knuckle their way through another day because they're dealing with all this stuff that they won't face, all these emotions, all these fears, all the rest of it. You know, they've got to be open and kind with themselves because other people won't be.
Yeah.
You know, you can have a child that's crying, they feel sad, and all the rest of it. People will be caring for that child. They won't be with a man. They'll be disgusted by it, and they'll be hostile towards it, and you're going to hurt yourself, and they're going to go out of the way to hurt you. You know, I've seen that in work environments and all the rest of it. You've got to be careful about it, but you've got to be open and honest with yourself and have compassion for yourself, because no one else will.
Like, for instance, even, I was just thinking about it now, even like this kind of language, I could probably resonate with what you actually mean when you're just speaking now in terms of compassion for yourself. But most guys, they kind of don't get it. They're a little bit embarrassed of those words because they knowingly sound feminine. But even things like, for instance, say the old statements like, you have to love your enemy. Guys who are used to literature of the past can kind of understand that a lot more these days than the younger guys, because the younger guys will go, why would I love my enemy? I don't get it. I have that. You're not explaining why I should. It sounds completely ridiculous. And if you don't have an elder trying to explain that, like you're loving and respecting your enemy isn't for them, it's for you. It's you love and respect your enemy. Like, respect your enemy, but don't have any enemies that you don't respect. That's the point. So, like, you love your enemies, so then you know what you stand for. If this person's a piece of shit, then I know what good is. If they act in a bad way, then I clearly know how to behave, and that will give me honor. That person disgusts me, so I know what's noble. Like, that's why you respect and love your enemy. But, like, just saying that phrase, that means so much to us because we have the basis of thinking and understanding, and we didn't have the censorship and filters that men have today. We know the meaning behind that word, and we know the power with which we can kind of go into the world and use it. But if you just say that to a guy, it sounds stupid. It's like, love my enemy? I fucking hate my enemy. Like, love and understand women? Why the hell would I want to know what female nature is about? They're bitches. You know, it's that sort of break, the bridge of seeing something negatively for what it is, and building that bridge towards how you can do something with it. And then, you know, the sunlight comes out, rather than being in this dark hole of throwing stones and being pissed off and bitter.
Yeah. And it's learning to regulate that, so you can learn those life skills. I mean, learn how to regulate sadness and fear. I mean, if you don't, how do those emotions manifest? I mean, they manifest, yes, in excess cortisol, which is going to damage the brain on prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus. I mean, you know, it's going to manifest as PTSD, potentially depression, guilt, shame, all these other things that can burst into anger. Yeah. I've seen the guys, you know, and they come again, they put some guy's head through a wall or stab someone. Yeah, well, you gave power to him. He now has control over your life. When you hit someone, they win.
Yeah. Again, female language. You process your feelings through emotion, like women do, but women don't actually have any consequences, and they're often rewarded for being emotive. But for a man, he's only negatively. He's castrated for going on his emotions. He has to process these things so he can express them in a more masculine way. That's the most effective and healthiest way for a man to operate. They're teaching men to operate like a woman, and the results keep getting him, as you said, kicked in the head.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's no way for a man to live.
I wanted to talk to you. I've watched your content. I've been floored by some of it. I thought it's fantastic. So it's sorely needed, I think, in the manosphere. And it's great that you're an older guy as well. You know, there's a great benefit there. It's something that's sadly lacking.
Thank you, man. Yeah, look, I'm just, again, no pun towards my name, but I didn't realize it until I showed my face. But then I understood why I actually named my channel what I did. I didn't realize it when I did, but then when I actually took that step forward, and there were a lot of things that I was afraid of doing, you know, doxing myself, but it just felt like the honest thing to do, because what I'm trying to communicate, I hope men will see, not to be like me, but to be more honest. You know, whatever kind of man you are, there's nothing to be afraid of. There is nothing to be afraid of. Because what tends to happen is a lot of these guys, if you make a video just on your own, and especially if you, it's a lot more covert. If it's like, you know, I can understand people hiding their face completely. I understand. But the more you hide yourself, the more you're in a little box. I think two things happen. One is that people tend to want to fight fight you because they don't see you as a real person. There's no natural conversation happening. So with the Discord, because it's in real time and like this, it's actual human beings in real time talking to each other. So it's not me debating someone else's point that was left in a paper. You know, these are real human beings interacting the way we're doing, or on Discord, or if I'm doing a video, it's still a human being in front of you talking. I'm exposed. I'm being genuine. But and I mentioned this to Stardust once, where he was asking me any ramifications I kind of experienced from going anonymous to showing myself. And I said they were only positive. Initially, a few guys left because they were kind of taken back. It's like the rules of Fight Club are you don't show your face. And so they didn't like, you know, they didn't like the doxing because they're kind of self-projecting. They're kind of going, well, if that was me, my life would be over. So I don't like that. It makes me feel uncomfortable. But I did it for myself. And what I noticed is a few guys left, but I got a lot more people coming over, trickling in over time and discovering me organically. And then that human part of it, the one-on-one discussion, the friendship, the being open. You know, here's one guy talking about a particular issue. What do you guys think? Has this happened to you? Let's talk about this because, you know, a lot of guys just bury it. This is really important when you think about it, A, B, C. Then all of a sudden these guys come out in the comment section and that's the stuff I benefited from. But what I mentioned to Stardust was the positive schism that happened was that when I showed myself, people actually have to contend with me as a real-life human being and show some sympathy and empathy because they can't pretend it's not. And Stardust actually reflected and said, okay, that's interesting because sometimes to him, he's baffled by some guys. He says one thing and they respond differently. And I actually think this is what I experienced is that if you're just a voice, people can actually take you as their voice running through their heads, but articulating it in a better way that they could. And so the moment that you say something that they disagree with, they fight you online the way they would fight themselves. Whereas when they see me online, they're not fighting themselves. They have to reflect because it's another person actually talking. They have to contend with reality. I'm not just a voice in their head that they think is them. I'm actually a voice from another person showing you that I'm a human being. You need to be a human being too.
It was interesting. It was because I was watching it and I'd seen you talking direct to camera, and it took me a moment. I said he's discussing MGTOW issues, but he's showing his face, and it's just to such a professional standard. And he's talking so articulately, and all the rest of it. And I'm going, wow, it took me a moment to reconcile those two things. This is brilliant. This is amazing.
But what does it tell you at the heart of it? To me, it was like, I'm so sick of men disappearing and being too ashamed to even speak and show themselves. We're always hiding. We're always not saying what we feel and think. To women, to the world, we have to keep censoring ourselves. I'm tired of censoring. I'm tired of not being who I am. I'm tired of hiding myself and apologizing just for being a human being. And so the impetus to be more genuine and real, which I think a lot of guys responded to, like, yes, that's a positive message. We're tired of apologizing, and this was kind of a stance of saying, yeah, fuck you, I have a right to be a human being just like everyone else. If you can be a blue-haired feminist, actually being such a bitch to guys openly, and you can keep your job as well as get 5 million subscribers online, the least I can do is be an articulate and polite guy talking as a man and being unapologetic. I'm not saying anything rude, but I have every right to express myself as a man. Fucked if I'm going to stay quiet and say silence and let myself die and then be buried. You know, I want to live. I want to live. That's basically my stance. And I hope by example other guys take some of that and be confident enough to say what they want to say and be who they want to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fucking powerful statement.
That was a pleasure. Thanks again for spending the time. I think a lot of guys will enjoy that. So thanks, man. But look, to me, this conversation should continue. This was really enjoyable, and I guarantee a lot of guys will really find this edifying. Let's do it again, and always feel free. You're welcome. My channel anywhere.
Cool.
See you, Spetsnaz. Bye.
See you, mate.
Subscribe, like, comment, link, or share my videos around. Remember to check my channel's community tab for the latest announcements on live discussion and Q&A. There are also donation options below if you'd like to support me. I appreciate those of you who have and continue to. Thanks. You're the best.